We want to start I guess I'll call the meeting to order, and then I have a list of things I want to read through here to get the meeting going. As everyone's aware, this is a little different and unique this time. So let me read through what we'll be doing, why we're going to do it tonight, and then we'll proceed into the rest of the agenda. So bear with me for just a minute. So good evening, everyone. I'm Braden Richmond. I'm the chair of the Southern Region Advisory Council. I'd like to welcome you this evening to the Southern Region Advisory Council meeting on April 14th, 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the associated safety guidelines put in place by CDC, the state of Utah, and local health departments, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources will conduct the April 2020 Regional Advisory Council and Utah Wildlife Board meetings using a fully electronic format. This meeting format was approved through an executive order by Utah Governor Gary Herbert and will be used in place of the in-person public meetings that usually occur around the state. I'll start by conducting a roll call for the record. Council members, please be ready to unmute your microphone when called upon and give an audible here when your name is called. We'll come back to that. I also want to recognize that we are joined by a number of DWR personnel who are participating live this evening, including those who provided presentations and are available to answer questions throughout the meeting. Those employees include Kobe Jones, the Big Game Coordinator, Chad Wilson, Private Lands Public Wildlife Coordinator, Brad Crompton, Southeast Region Assistant Wildlife Manager, Darren DeBlois, Game Mammals Program Coordinator, Stacy Coons, Administrative Rules Coordinator, Lindy Varney, License Coordinator, Greg Hansen, the Attorney General's Office, Teresa Griffin, the Southern Region Wildlife Manager, and then we are joined by our regional wildlife biologies, Vance Munford, Jason Nichols, Mike Wardle, Kyle Christensen, and Levi Watkins. We're joined by Seth Decker, the Richfield Sergeant, Kevin Bundle, the Southern Region Supervisor, Jace Taylor. Oh, Jace Taylor, the Bighorn Sheep Biologist, is also with us. And Kent Hersey, the Big Game Project Coordinator. Also, Denise Gilligan, she's taking notes for the meeting, and Phil Tuttle, the Outreach Manager. Hopefully I didn't butcher any of those names too badly. A special thank you to the many hours that have been worked to prepare for tonight's meeting. This forum wouldn't be possible without your efforts. I can't imagine the work that went in behind the scenes to make this function. Finally, and most importantly, I'd like to welcome the public who are tuning into this evening by watching the live broadcast on YouTube. In preparation for this online format, the DWR posted each of tonight's presentations online. The public was able to view those presentations and submit their written comments for each of those items for 10 days. Due to the sheer volume of comments we received, we will not be able to read those into the record. We will do our best to summarize those public comments for you this evening. And all of those comments have been sent to the RAC members in their entirety for their review and consideration. We won't be able to accommodate additional public comments during tonight's meeting, but RAC members are welcome to address specific concerns they receive from the public or outlined in written comments we all received. Now we're going to review how the meeting will work tonight. Just to make sure everyone is on the same page tonight, we'll adhere to the following format for each of tonight's agenda items. I will announce the agenda item, and we will not listen to presentations by the DWR personnel tonight. All RAC members have been asked to view the recorded presentation online prior to this meeting. The regional supervisor will then summarize the public comments received for that agenda item. I will then call for questions from the RAC members on that agenda item. After questions, I will call for RAC discussion, including any clarification or additional information RAC members may request from the DWR staff. We will be sure to revisit each of the items for discussion, motions, including a second, followed by a roll call vote. We will repeat this process until we have addressed everyone's feedback. We will repeat that process for each of tonight's agenda items. I ask that the RAC members please respect one another's opinions and opportunities to speak this evening. If more than one of you are wishing to speak at once, Please be patient while we call on you one at a time. Please also be sure to clearly communicate your questions or concerns so we can work through tonight's meetings efficiently, effectively, and respectfully. With those introductory and housekeeping items taken care of, let's get started by reviewing and approving tonight's agenda and minutes. Actually, I need to circle back and roll call the RAC members. So if we could go down the list of RAC members and I could have you turn on your mic and introduce yourself. We also have one new RAC member tonight, Dan Fletcher. So Dan, if you could take just a brief second to introduce as you're new to the RAC. So Austin Atkins.
Austin Atkinson here.
Gene Boardman. And if you wouldn't mind saying who you represent as we go down the list. Okay, Riley Roberts.
Riley Roberts, sportsman at large.
Thank you. Chad Utley.
Chad Utley at large.
Nick Jorgensen.
Nick Jorgensen.
Sean Kelly.
Sean Kelly, Forest Service.
Verlin King.
Missed that. Verlin King, agriculture.
Craig Lobb.
Craig Lobb, agriculture.
Tammy Pearson.
Tammy Pearson, elected official.
They asked if we could go back to Bart.
Bart Batista, non-consumptive.
Thank you. And Dan Fletcher.
Dan Fletcher, Assistant Field Manager, Cedar City Bureau of Land Management.
Okay, thank you. And it appears that all of our mics are working. That's a good step on a night like tonight. So appreciate that. Let's now go in to review the previous minutes. Are there any questions or concerns regarding the agenda and minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to accept and approve the agenda and minutes.
I'll make that.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Tammy Pearson made a motion to accept the minutes and Nick Jorgensen seconded that motion. And we'll do a roll call vote now. Nick, I'm waiting for my cheat sheet of my roll call. Austin Atkinson. So on the roll calls, if you can just unmute your mic, wait for a half second and say yes or no. Austin Atkinson.
Austin, yes.
Bart Batista.
Bart Batista, yes.
Gene Boardman.
Gene Boardman, yes.
Riley Roberts.
Riley, yes.
Chad Utley.
Chad Utley, yes.
Nick Jorgensen.
Nick Jorgensen, yes.
Sean Kelly.
Sean Kelly, yes.
Verlin King.
Verlin King, yes.
Craig Lobb.
Craig Lobb, yes.
Tammy Pearson.
Tammy Pearson, yes.
And Dan Fletcher.
Dan Fletcher, abstain. I was not at the last meeting.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and jump into the first item on the agenda, and that is the Wildlife Board meeting update. I'm going to just quickly go through the action item, the motions on the meeting. So there was a motion made that we approve the minutes. Actually, that one's a foregone. The first motion of the meeting, a motion that I move that we maintain the unlimited resident pursuit permits as is, restrict one non-resident permit to 2 pursuit per restricted units and unlimited on the others, and institute the 16 dog limit statewide, maintain the 8 dog limit in the summer pursuit and the 16 take permits. This was made by Carl, seconded by Kevin Albrecht, and passed unanimously. The next motion was I move that we add on ethics course for the online bear orientation and institute an online pursuit ethics course prior to purchasing a permit. That motion was made by Wade Heaton and seconded by Brett Selman, and that was tabled for further discussion. The next motion, I move that we increase the statewide recommended bear permits by 25% on all units except for the Beaver, Boulder, Book Cliffs, Cache, and Chalk Creek units. Permit numbers would increase by 50% for these units. That motion was made by Carl Hurst and seconded by Wade Heaton and passed unanimous. Oh, I was reading the list wrong. So this one was tabled. Sorry, that motion was tabled. I knew that was wrong as soon as I said that. So that one was tabled. There was a lot more discussion if you watch the meeting. And then the motion was made that I move that we table the previous motion on the bear permit increase, present the other agenda items, and then revisit the motion after lunch when board gathers more information and the division recalculates permit numbers. You know, Kevin, this would be easier if you weren't scrolling as I was reading. That's right. The following motion was made by Carl Hurst, seconded by Wade Heaton, and passed unanimous. After lunch, when they came back, the motion was made to move to withdraw the original motion and move to approve the division's revised permit numbers that included the 3 units in the Upper Harvest, Bear, Book Cliffs, and Chalk Creek units. That motion was made by Wade Heaton, seconded by Brett Selman, and failed on a vote of 3-4. The next motion was that they move to that we do nothing on the units that have 10 or less permits, increase permits by 25% on Beaver, Chalk Creek, and both Book Cliffs units, and increase permits by 10% on the remaining units. The board would also defer to the division to determine the permit distribution among the available seasons on units that have crowding issues, the LaSalle's and San Juan. And that motion was made by Carl Hurst and seconded by Donnie Hunter and passed unanimously. The next motion was to accept the balance of R657-33 Black Bear and R657-10 Cougar rule amendments as presented, including the red line correction on the 8-dog limit for both the summer pursuit and restricted seasons pursuit. That motion was made by Kevin Albrecht and seconded by Wade Heaton and passed unanimously. The next motion was to approve the wolf management plan as presented by the division. That motion was made by Donnie Hunter, seconded by Randy Dirth, and passed unanimously. The next motion was to accept the brine shrimp COR rule amendments as presented by the division. That motion was made by Carl Hurst, seconded by Wade Heaton, and passed unanimously. And I believe the final motion was to approve Mr. Eland's long necker's variance request for Pacific White Lake shrimp. That motion was made by Randy Dirth, seconded by Donnie Hunter, and passed unanimously. For those that watched the board meeting, the bear discussion there was a lot of information there. If you have questions, I would encourage you to go back and watch that. Some good information in there. Anything else we should add there, Kevin? Okay. Next item on the agenda would be the regional update, and I'll turn that over to Kevin. No.
Thank you, Braden. I'll try to be brief, but it's been a while since we've met, so I do have a number of updates I'd like to give you. First, with our wildlife section, we'd like to welcome Levi Watkins to the region. He's our new wildlife biologist in the LOA district, so he'll cover the Boulder, Thousand Lakes, and Parker Mountain. The biologists have been busy. They're just in the process of finishing up sage grouse let counts. I would encourage anybody that hasn't had a chance to experience that to get out and do it. We're in the middle of our pronghorn flights when the COVID-19 restrictions hit. We were able to finish up a few of the units, but had to discontinue others because of the closeness of people in the plane. So we'll get back to those as soon as we can. We are starting to see some elk coming down into farmlands, and we're working hard with landowners and our landowner specialists to try to alleviate those problems. And we've begun our annual Utah prairie dog census, and populations look at least stable there. Moving on to our aquatic section. They're probably the section that's moving on or just continuing as business as normal as much as anybody, because so much of their work is in small groups and out in the field. They've been doing their gill netting surveys. They've surveyed Otter Creek, Newcastle, Minersville, and Paiute so far, and things look really good in terms of fish populations. Even had some large trout in Paiute Reservoir, and we haven't been able to do anything in Paiute for a number of years because the water levels have been so low. Ice is starting to come off at the higher locations. Within the next week, we should see open water at Panguitch, Kolob, and then Fish Lake is still probably 3 or 4 weeks out before we have open water at Fish Lake. And then if you're not aware, Lake Powell is currently closed to all boats and access. And we're working hard with Arizona and the National Park Service to, when the time's right, to do something at Lake Powell. From our habitat section, they're just wrapping up all of last year's treatments. Again, the southern region is setting the standard for the state in terms of habitat treatments. We treated over 70,000 acres, primarily with pinyon juniper removal, about 15,000 acres of prescribed fire to improve aspen, 200 acres of rabbit brush mowing, a lot of water developments, including guzzlers, ponds, and pipelines, and several other miscellaneous habitat projects. With our outreach section, if you'd help us spread the word that we do have some dedicated hunter projects that are still available. We've set up some projects that are specifically allow people to follow the social distancing guidelines, including doing bitter brush plantings and in some cases some PJ lopping. I hope everybody is excited to know, and this is another one that hit at just the wrong time, so it's been hard to get the word out, but we now have a completely online option for Hunter's Ed, including the field day that people can do independently. And so hopefully we'll get the word out with that. From our admin section, if you're not aware, we gave people an option to turn in bear and turkey tags to surrender those and get their points back. And with that, we had 78 spring bear and 363 spring turkey permits surrendered during the online process. Now, there were some additional permits that were surrendered through the mail that we don't have an accounting for yet. But it'll be, I don't think those will add drastically to those numbers. Law enforcement, we've got several personnel changes. We've hired Brandon White, who was our former conservation officer in Beaver, will now be our new sergeant over in the Panguitch area and over that crew. And then we're going to be getting new officers in Wayne County. Julie Sabatis is just finishing up her training now and will be going to Wayne County. And then our Fillmore district, we have another brand new conservation officer by the name of Stetson West that will be taking over the Fillmore district. Those two will both hit their districts around the 1st of July and then be in their field training process for another 3 or 4 months after that. Law enforcement's been really busy helping state parks with law enforcement activities due to all the county closures and different regulations that are going on around the state right now. We've also been helping some of the counties that have recreation orders to enforce those. AIS is working, trying to track down boats that came off Lake Powell without being sealed, as everything was kind of in chaos for a while. But we're making progress there. And unless there's questions, that's all I've got, Braden.
Thank you. Any questions from the RAC? All right, let's move on to the first agenda item. So the first agenda item is the Bucks, Bulls, and Once in a Lifetime permit recommendations for 2020. Again, we've all viewed the presentations prior to the meeting and have also reviewed the public's comments. So I will turn it back over to Kevin to give us the summaries of the public comments.
Okay, for the first agenda item, which is the Bucks, Bulls, and Once in a Lifetime. So we had a total of 29 people give us comments through the online system, which is frankly a little lower than I expected. For comparison, we had about 90, so almost 3 times that number for the November RAC. But of those 29 people, 31% of those, which comes out to be 9 people supported the recommendation. About 45% or about 13 people opposed it, and the remainder were neutral. As I'm sure many of you did, I went through all of the comments to kind of summarize those. There were a few people that were frustrated or didn't support the proposal because they didn't like to see they didn't want cuts in permit numbers, but there were probably about twice as many that wanted to see more permits cut. If I had to summarize the comments, it's probably about 2 to 1 in those directions. There was also some miscellaneous comments on sheep and some other things that I'm sure you read, and I think I'll leave it at that, Braden.
Thank you. Now we'll move to questions from the RAC. I've toyed with this on whether we should do roll call questions or let you speak up. Maybe what we'll do is do a roll call for the questions. And so I'll just go down the list and go one by one to see if you have questions. So if you have a question, try to state it clearly and precise. If you don't have a question, just respond with no. So Austin Atkinson.
Yeah, I do have a question. The hunter satisfaction rating seems to be pretty low on the beaver, Southwest Desert, Plateau Fish Lake, and I understand those are general season units, but I'm wondering how that's being received by the department and how that's being accepted into these recommendations. I feel like a lot of those comments came from sportsmen that hunt in the beaver and Southwest Desert. So I wonder how the department is reacting to that in these recommendations.
So I guess that question's for me more than anything. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So we do always look at hunter satisfaction. We care. Obviously, we want to have satisfied clients, and we want to provide a good experience for folks that hunt. One of the things that hunter satisfaction is always highly correlated with harvest success. You can almost get rid of hunter satisfaction and just close your eyes and look at harvest success, and it's pretty close to the same, especially when you've had really, really high harvest success. If we look at some of those units you talked about, the beaver, for example, the beavers had extremely high harvest success. If you look at the past 5 years, 44%, almost 45%, 41, 39, 37. And a lot of those years, buck-doe ratios that were exceeding the management objective. 22 and 15, 24 and 16, dropping down in 17. But when we look at this, we knew that last year we would have frustrated hunters because it dropped from 37% to 24%. So one of the ways that we try to address that is just to manage to the plan, which means cutting a lot of permits. And on a lot of these units in southern Utah, the ones where we know we lost deer, we cut permits to address that. So I don't know if that's exactly Austin, but the other data plays into that. You can look at hunter satisfaction, but you can also look at harvest success, buck-doe ratios, and it all works together. So we did take it into account, and we cut permits where we needed to.
Thank you. Can I ask a quick follow-up question on that? For the Southwest Desert, it seems like the population that's being used here seems pretty status quo. We're still at about a 3,000. And so we're not seeing a a permit change on the Southwest Desert, and that seems very concerning with sportsmen that I've talked to. I don't personally hunt that unit, but those that have seem very concerned.
All right, Austin, go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I'll just restate that. This is Austin, and just talking about the survey numbers on Southwest Desert for deer, sitting at about a 3,000 deer estimated population. So we're not changing the recommended tags for general season deer, still at 800. But most of the sportsmen I've talked to that have hunted there seem very concerned that that's staying the same. What are they doing wrong, or where are these survey numbers still showing flat? Are we surveying Nevada deer? What is going on there?
Well, I think I can answer part of that. But first of all, last year was a hard hunt for a lot of reasons. Even in areas where we had deer, there were a lot of reasons why it just wasn't a great hunt. The timing wasn't great. A lot of hunters were frustrated with the moon phase and everything else that goes into this. And some animals where they find them where they usually are, they just weren't there. When we came back to classify, we found a lot of deer in the traditional ranges, but they were slow. This is even including, division biologists that have hunted those areas too. A lot of our own folks were frustrated at the deer hunt this last year. But I think I'm going to turn part of this over to Jason. But if the RAC will allow me, and Austin, if he'll allow me, I can show you a little bit about how we did deer permit recommendations this year, and how the new plan allows us to take into account some other data and be a little different. Is that okay, Mr. Chair? Is that okay, Austin?
Yeah, if you could. I've watched this presentation on the other racks, and I think it was very beneficial. I think it'd be really good.
Okay.
And I apologize about that disruption. I thought I could sneak away and grab my phone, which was charging across the room, and I messed things up.
It was awesome, Braden. Okay, so I'm going to just present my screen, and this maybe won't be specific to Southwest Desert as much, but then I'll allow Jason to speak to that as well. All right, well, everybody let me know when they're seeing this.
Yeah, it's up.
Since the question was specifically about Southwest Desert and why we didn't cut permits there, that one, if that's okay. And then if there are any other units that RAC members want to see, we can go to there. I'll make that a little larger. So the old plan allowed us to take into account permit recommendations, 3-year average and trend. But we've always known that these general season units are driven by those yearling bucks. They're driven by that fawn crop. And so as important as the number of deer on the landscape is what your fawn-to ratios are, and then what your fawn survival is. At times, looking back, that's where the division was more retroactive, right? Because we missed that fawn crop, and then according to the plan, we'd have to wait until that showed up in the buck-doe ratio the following year in a few years. The new plan allows us to look at everything more holistically. And so let's just take a look at Southwest Desert and the buck-doe ratios that we've had for the last 5 years. At the top here, with last year being 20.4. Right, so at the very top end of the objective. Fawn-to ratios, again, these are a little lower. Being a desert unit, we like to see this number about 60. But they're pretty stable and consistent, with the exception of 2018. They dipped there a little bit. Last year, 50 fawns per 100 does. The population estimate, which is what you brought up, Austin, and all the population estimate really is it's a metric of, we know we had this much harvest. On this unit, we don't have actual collars on the unit. We can't physically collar every unit. We have a representative unit that we're pulling that data from. This is the Pine Valley. And so based on survival, harvest, and buck-to ratios after, we determine the population estimate. It's basically a calculator saying if you had this many deer and you harvested this many, you would have had to have had at least number of deer to be able to have this buck-doe ratio after, right? And then monitor fawn survival. And again, several units we have collars on the unit. Very labor intensive. We collar over 800 deer a year. Spend most of December, some of November, and even go into January times to get this done. So that's the data that we have and the data that we've always used. Then we wanted to take into account how many permits we've historically been issuing, what harvest looks like on those permits, and then it's just percent success. I can see Kevin in the background there. Finally, hope you guys are staying 6 feet apart. Now this is where it gets a little more predictive, Austin, and we looked at all this data, and then this last year as we caught deer and looked at body condition scores, we predicted what survival would look like. We've got some pretty good survival curves, and Kent Hersey has those ready to go. We can show some of those and show what we use to predict survival, but it's basically how fat these animals are, how fat they are. And we can look at that and get a pretty good guess most of the time on what survival is going to look like for that year. So on this unit, we predict we're going to have 90% adult doe survival, 60% fawn survival, which is not out of the realm of possibility. You know, and in 2015, we had 90%. Fawn survival is more variable than adult doe survival, obviously, but it's possible to have very high survival in your fawns. And we're looking like we should come into those numbers now. So with all that data taken into account, if we issue 800 permits, under high success, we'd be just below what we're managing for. But with average to low success, we're within the range or even exceeding the range. And that's the rationale that we use for the permit recommendation that we have this year. These numbers, in fact, again, I'll just reiterate, they're highly driven by the number of fawns, those yearling bucks. And when I say fawn here, what I mean is a 6-month-old fawn in December that we collar, and then it'll be a 1.5 years old by the time the hunt rolls around. When that number drops, we really have to cut permits. And so far on this unit, our fawn doe ratios and our fawn survivals look like we can handle the number of permits that are out there. Is there any other unit? While I have this up, is there questions on any other unit that the RAC would like to ask? Or concerns?
Yeah, Chloe, would you mind pulling up the beaver unit? That continues to be what we're probably hearing the most feedback on in our region.
Absolutely. The beaver was the first one of these we did, is we built the sheet and put the formulas in it. And it was the one where, you know, a little bit of sticker shock when we saw what we were going to have to cut to get into the population, to get into the buck-doe ratio we're managing for. We've lost some deer on the beaver. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. You know, we topped out almost 15,000 deer a few years back, and we've trended steadily downward to where now we're estimating a population of 12,000 deer on that unit. The survival on the beaver, we did put some collars out there this year, but this survival is surrogate survival from the Monroe. As you can see, deer have struggled there. Adult doe survival, you always want to be at about 85%. 71 is terrible, for lack of a better word. We've had some really poor survival over the years on these units. And it shows up in the buck-doe ratio eventually, right? As you continue to harvest, you just drop that as you have fewer deer on the landscape. Also, your fawn doe ratios been a little lower the last few years, and fawn survival below 50%, except for last year, which is a struggle. Taking all that data into account and looking what's going on, we predicted this year deer came in fat. They looked good. So we feel like we've got a good chance of hitting that west-wide average of 85% adult dose survival. And if we look at the last update that Randy sent out, on the Monroe, we're at 90% right now. So good overwinter survival. On the beaver itself, where we have collars, 25 of the 29 deer are alive, we're at 86%. So as we come out and with that prediction here, which means we know that we'll be somewhere in the low to average success. So cutting from 3,000 to 2,100 permits, we hope to come right into that buck-doe ratio at the bottom of it at 18 right there.
Kobe, you lost me a little bit there. You said that the body fat was good, but my understanding is that beaver had horrible body fat.
You're right. Well, I think horrible is the wrong word. It wasn't as good as we saw in some of the surrounding units.
Well, wasn't it the second worst in the state?
For that latitude, it was bad. Yeah. I'm sorry, I did misspeak there. You're right. Fairly moderate winter though. Things are looking good, looking like these numbers are good, solid numbers. On all these, we missed the boat on one of them, and that's the cache. And in the last, we had it right looking at past years and survival curves, but in the past 3 weeks, the fawns on the cache started to tip over. And so we were estimating this 60%. Now it's 45%. And so to come into the buck-doe ratio on the cache, managing even a lower buck-doe ratio, we probably would need to cut an additional 800 permits. I feel like I've taken up a lot of time. I don't want to take up any more time than folks want, but I can answer or show any of this and any of the rationale. Jason, I think the other thing that we need to mention is on the Southwest Desert, we're still above the management objective this year with our buck-doe ratio. And I guess I'd ask Jason if he had anything to add to that, since this really is a regional thing.
Yes, thank you, Kobe. I would say on the Southwest Desert this year, I did see fewer deer during my deer classification out there. I typically average around 500 deer classified in the November, December postseason deer classification. This year, I did classify just a little over 250 deer. I think the deer, in my opinion, are still there. This year, we did have a good pine nut crop on the Southwest Desert, and we did have a good distribution of water with the moisture that we had from the previous winter. Springs that were running that hadn't ran in several years with the drought that we'd had previous. So I think the deer population on the Southwest Desert is stable. And as Kobe said, our postseason buck-to-doe ratio is still above its objective. Thank you.
Austin recommended, and I think I'd like to take his recommendation of what we could do is ask questions based on species. And so we do a roll call. I know that deer probably have the most questions. So let's focus on deer, and then we'll circle back to elk, and then maybe do antelope and once in a lifetime in a lump. But let's run through questions on deer and keep the focus on deer for just a minute. Austin, do you have any more questions on deer?
No, just a thanks to showing me that document. I appreciate that, and it helps all of us see a little bit more how those numbers come to be. So thank you.
All right, Bart, any questions on the deer portion?
No questions. I do like seeing that other metrics are being used to determine permit numbers.
Gene Boardman, any questions on this portion?
Yes, I do have questions. I'd like to have them pull up the general season buck deer application slide.
Gene, are you asking for the slide from the online presentation?
That's correct.
Is that something we can do, Kobe?
We can't hear you, Kobe. I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to get it to present at the same time, unmute myself. Gene, here it is.
Okay. Apparently, it doesn't take in your recommendation to cut 10,000 permits this year for 2020.
Yeah. No, Gene, that's a fair point. This is just a consistent line. Since about 1994, we've been between 97,000 and 90 permits. So you're right. This shows it at about 90,000 permits, and we're recommending well below that this year.
So that's going to drop your draw success rate down about 10-12%. And it'll increase your unsuccessful rate by the same amount.
That's correct. And honestly, depending upon where you're at, which RAC and which region, Kevin summarized this, but we've been criticized for cutting too much and been criticized for not cutting enough on both ends. So I feel like if everybody's a little upset, it must be the right place to be.
Well, you're a big game manager, but the question to the department is, does anybody consider what this does to which tiers of hunting applicants, what it does to them? For instance, you got 4 tiers. Lifetime hunters get all their permits. Dedicated hunters basically get all their permits. And so the cut is always on everybody else. I'd just like to hear that. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think that's the way it's going to be cut. But I'd like to just hear that it's being considered, that everybody has a little skin in the game.
And I don't know if there's anybody from licensing on the call or not. Lindy, if you're listening or watching, I'd appreciate your comment on this. But fair criticism. Lifetime license holders obviously get and they invested in that years and years ago. And but everybody else is percentage based, percentage of the permits based. And so when the dedicated hunter quota percentage fills, they don't draw that either. So that's as fair as we can make it, is to make it percentage based, but I understand the frustration. I think a lot of folks will be frustrated when they don't draw.
Any additional questions, Gene?
No, that'll cover deer, I think.
All right, Riley.
No, not. I don't think so. I had several, but I think I'll hold off for a minute, see what the other comments are, and then maybe I'll chime back in.
Okay. Chad.
No questions.
Nick.
It just popped up and said Nick has left the meeting. You must have done something frustrating, Braden.
I saw him reach up to push a button on his phone. He must have pushed end. So hopefully he'll rejoin us in just a minute. Sean, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Berlin?
Yeah, I've got one. We talked about on that presentation, he was showing us these numbers going down. What do you attribute that to? Some of those were going down before the bad drought. Years so ago. Was it predators or was it something else?
Verlin, that really depends on the unit. That's a really good question, actually. So some of these units we saw we saw a big spike through about 2015, 2016 in the numbers. And we saw them really go up. And then as we kept monitoring deer, and I'm thinking of the Monroe specifically, we then saw the Monroe, we saw skinny deer, and then we saw them slowly start to drop back off. So they spiked, they grew 2015, 2016. We saw body condition, body fat go down, just like I'm sure you'd see it in the livestock industry. And skinny deer don't have healthy fawns, and they also don't survive well. So they started to go back down, go back down. Well, we lost deer on the Monroe unit for several years until we hit just last year. And then it was crazy how, as we built deer in a lot of these places, we built predators too. And so that take by predators, as the deer population dropped down below, it in 1 year, it went from the primary cause of mortality being, mostly malnutrition and other factors to being predators. It actually switched. And so it's a really complicated question to answer. But as we saw deer fall off in the state on a few units around the state, we watched that slowly switch, or I guess quickly switch would be a better word for it, switch from malnutrition to predators. As we built predators, we built deer. And that's why we reacted so quickly and said, all right, on these units, we've got to work to remove predators because we have too many on the landscape. Does that answer your question, brother?
Yeah, pretty good. Did you see a difference in the elk too at the same time? Do they follow the same thing as the deer?
Yeah. So it's a little bit different in elk. They're just a little more resistant, a little more resilient than deer. But what we saw I think in bison and elk is more similar. So in bison, our cow-calf ratios in bison dropped to 15 calves per 100 cows. And we saw our cow-calf ratios in elk drop too. So survival wasn't affected as much, but the pregnancy rates just fell off and they just didn't have any calves. So they were a little different. As far as predators, we do have some predation by lions on elk, but studies, we haven't found it to be a significant factor.
All right, that's good, thanks.
Let's jump back to Nick. And Nick, do you have any questions? We lost you last time.
Didn't have any questions, but I sure appreciated Kobe's presentation. It was an eye-opener for me, and I think we struck a real good balance. I know it wasn't the comment section, but felt like I wanted to say that.
Thanks, Nick. Craig, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I got comments when we get on the Pine Valley when we get there.
Tammy.
No questions.
And Dan, any questions on the deer piece?
No questions.
Okay, let's change over to elk then.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing. I didn't show the Pine Valley unit on that sheet that we built. And it's one that's it's a really good example. Would you be okay if I just showed the Pine Valley to the group as well before we move on?
I think let's look at it quick, but I think it would be good to see. And I know I would assume those online would be interested in that.
Okay, let's switch over to the Pine Valley. So this is one where if we just looked at the data, we're above the, I should make this bigger so everybody can see what we're talking about. If we just looked at the data, we're above the buck-doe ratio. We've got great survival. We're right there at 59 fawns per 100 does. A lot of things, and looking just at that data, the old data that we used to consider would almost recommend an increase. But then as we dug into it a little bit, we do have a stable population on the Pine Valley. But as we dug into it a little bit and looked at this RAC with what's coming in, estimating 60% fawn survival, 90% adult survival, which isn't out of the question, and average success, it should come in right there at 19.3 without increasing any permits or decreasing any permits. And that was the rationale behind the Pine Valley RAC. That's where it came from. So sorry for that interruption. I feel like this is one that everybody has a lot of focus on and probably wanted to know where that recommendation came from. Jason looked at the data and he felt like this was a good spot to be.
Thank you. I appreciate you showing that. I'm sure there's interest in that unit online. So. All right, let's jump over to elk. Austin, we'll circle back up to you. We won't keep you at the top of the list all night, but maybe for the first agenda item.
That sounds good. I do have some questions about the beaver elk. They are, kind of related with antlerless as well, but why we're killing or issuing so many cow tags on the beaver and so few bull tags. I was wondering, is there an easy way to see how many spikes are being taken off of that? Like, is there somewhere that we can see cow harvest, spike harvest, and bull harvest together to understand how these are all affecting this population objective? Is that a tool that's available, or is that being used?
We do use that. Yes, we do take into account all types of harvest when we do that. But as you know, we recommend bull permits and cow permits differently. Right. But when we're looking at it, yeah, you always say, well, I'm pulling off this many spikes. And when we get our harvest data, we get our spike harvest data by unit. Mike, would you like to take this one though and answer as to why you're recommending the permits you are on the beaver? Is that?
So this is Mike Wardle. I'm the biologist over the beaver. The main reason is that we're within our age objective for bull permits. And so, like Kobe mentioned, with limited entry bull tags, we manage based on the average age of the harvested bulls from the previous year. And since we're in that age objective, we were towards the top end of it. And so I felt like there was an opportunity there to increase bull tags. I do have the numbers. It's going to take me a minute to pull them up, but if you'd like, I can look up numbers for spike harvest and stuff. But really, when it comes to those limited entry bull tags, we're looking at the average age of the harvested bulls.
Mike, just so we provide the information necessary, why don't you continue to look that up for Austin, and we can display that. And then also, Austin, any of that information that we can get to you that you would like to see, we can get that to you as well.
Yeah, I think my question will come more when we get to the antlerless section. So if he wants to find that data and we can talk about it on antlerless, I'll ask you the question then. Thank you.
All right, Bart, questions on the elk?
None.
Gene?
Yes, I've got a question on.
This is Kent. We killed 89 spikes on the FYI.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gene.
Okay. My question's on tags for Mount Dutton on the bull elk. The recommendations to reduce it by 4. Looking at it and the Panguitch Lake, the recommendation is to leave the Panguitch Lake the same as it is, but the 3-year average on the Dutton is higher than the Panguitch Lake. So I'd just like the justification for cutting 4 tags on the Mount Dutton herd.
Kyle, would you like to take that one? I think we good explanation, but Kyle, I know you'd love a chance to talk to.
Oh yeah, I'll take that one. Gene, the reason we cut permits on the Dutton is it had a significant age drop in 2019 and a population decrease. And the reason that we left the Panguitch the same was, although our 3-year average age is a little bit lower on the Panguitch, we've significantly been trending higher every year. Our 3-year age is a little bit lower, but I think that if we if we keep where we're at, we're going to come in our age where we want it to be. That answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Riley.
Just a clarification, can you, what is our allocation percentage on non-resident tags on our elk? Is it like a 10%?
Yeah, Riley, it's roughly 10%. So, and that's on everything statewide. So, and I know that sometimes when we obviously decide whether or not we're going to have a non-resident hunt in November, and then we come around and issue permits now. And so there's sometimes where that percentage gets a little out of whack, and then we have to fix it next year. But we aim for 10%. We issue 1, but then we don't issue 2 until 15. Does that make sense?
It does. So for example, so if there was something that may have been a little bit out of whack this year in the numbers on the non-resident side, that would hopefully be taken care of in the coming years, or this year was a makeup from last year or something.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at Bison on the Henrys, that's a perfect example. We said we'd have some non-resident permits in those. And where we offered that hunt, we had to have that. But then when we got the data all together and realized that we had such poor cow-calf ratios, we had to cut permits. And so we have some hunts with very few permits that wouldn't qualify for a non-resident permit. The next year would get turned off or shut off.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Chad.
No questions.
Nick.
No questions. Thank you.
Sean.
Yeah, no questions on elk.
Verlin.
No questions.
Craig.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. On the Southwest Desert, some people I talked to that hunt out there are a little bit concerned about that when you do your count, that the elk, we're counting Nevada elk because during the hunting season there don't seem to be as many elk there. Is there? He was talking about collaring some to see where those elk were at. Have you got any information on that?
Jason, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We have collared elk on the Southwest Desert. We've collared them from Hamlin Valley to Pine Valley and most recently over on the Frisco and Shawnee ranges. We have seen elk from that Hamlin Valley area move into Nevada. Some of them have come back, but there are a percentage of them that have stayed into Nevada. When we did collar elk in Hamlin Valley, it was within a couple of weeks after our last survey. So those elk that we did collar there in Hamlin Valley were the ones that moved to Nevada and didn't come back. I do feel that our last population estimate was a little bit high due to Nevada elk that have not come back since being in Nevada at the time. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and that's kind of the feeling people that hunt there a lot, including me, that elk numbers are not as high as as your estimates. My other question deals with the boulder. Is the boulder on the east end? I don't think probably don't go over to the west end to winter. I think they probably winter off on the east end, and I was wondering, is that skewing the number of elk on the boulder to count that whole big mountain as one unit instead of maybe splitting because the cow hunts you split, the east and the west, and so I was wondering about if that wouldn't be advantageous to cut the hunt on the east and west, just split that unit in for hunting.
For bulls specifically?
Yeah, for bulls.
Yeah, this really, Levi, you should probably answer this. But this is a question we get statewide. Why do we do this on different units? And really, We do it for cows to force individuals into areas where we need to get the harvest. On bulls, it's more of a recreational opportunity, get meat and trophy hunt as well. And so we're less concerned about forcing that pressure into areas, but it's obviously something we can consider and should consider moving forward. Are there areas that would be better to split it up? We really started to do this in bighorn sheep to direct pressure to areas we wanted. And it's ended up in us being able to issue more permits when you can force somebody in areas that don't get hunted as hard. So Craig, I that's not something that we're looking at right now, but it's something I think we look at moving forward in areas as well. Do you have anything to add to that, Levi?
The only thing I would add is where with bulls we're managing to an age objective. We're not really looking at where the bulls are in the winter and where we're counting them, but it's that harvested age. And so that's kind of where our recommendations are coming from there, where antlerless, it's managed a little differently.
All right, thank you.
Tammy, any questions on elk?
No questions.
Dan?
No questions.
Okay, let's do questions on the bulk of the recommendations. So antelope and once in a lifetime species. Austin, any questions?
Yes, I do have a question on recommendations for sheep. We got quite a few comments on sheep, but one question is, would it be possible when we receive these recommendations to also see the number of permits that are allocated for conservation, like in the same table, or to be able to see statewide permits next to all of the other unit recommended permits so we could see all the pressure being placed on these sheep units? Is that a possibility, or that always remains separate?
No, well, Austin, that's actually a really good question. It's a possibility. We sometimes we do it to not try to confuse people, because it is more complicated. Like you said, there's conservation permits, there's expo permits. We do take all of those into account one way or another when we're talking about permits on the unit. You know, the wild card is always like the statewide guys, but there's not a lot of statewide. There's 2 for deserts and 2 for Rockies. But when we look at harvest and recommend permit numbers, we recommend a number of sheep to be harvested. And then we take into account conservation permits in addition to that. And then as per rule, we deduct expo permits after. So we can get you whatever information you want there, though. I'd like to see, we have that information. We want to be forthright and give whatever information folks would like to see.
Okay. Well, one quick follow-up question on the San Juan desert sheep. It showed that 2 hunters did not kill, and now we're increasing permits from 3 to 5. The question for the biologists or for Jace would be, are we increasing permits there because those hunters didn't fill? Is it simple math as that? Or is there something else going on there with that population?
It's more complicated than that. We divided that unit up and added more units this year to force hunters into pockets of sheep that aren't being hunted. They're hard to get to. They're hard to hunt. But, we added San Juan River. We had San Juan North. We still have Lockhart, San Juan South. So we divided up and said, all right, these sheep aren't being hunted. So we do our census and say, there's nobody going in here, to the point where this last year on one of these units, we were trying to help hunters as best we could get onto ramps, because we do care. We know this is a once in a lifetime experience, and we obviously walk that ethical line. We try to help. If we know of sheep in areas, we do help hunters. And anybody who has a permit and calls, it's not exclusive. So we had an 8-year-old ram die. We just had a ram just die because they didn't get harvest. So we've got sheep in these areas. Flights look good, numbers look good, but they're hard to hunt. Jace, I think you probably have something to add there. If I missed something, Jace, please answer.
No, not much to add. Maybe some numbers that might help Austin. So last year, 2019, there were 3 permits that were offered for the San Juan South. Now, what was called the San Juan South last year was more than what we have as the San Juan South of this year. So it included the river portion and then even a little bit of what is now the north. So like Kobe was saying, the way it was split up, there are now just 2 permits for the San Juan South. There's 1 permit for the San Juan River, and then there's 2 permits up in what's the San Juan North. So that's where you're getting that number 5. But really, it's more micro divided than it was before, with more area that's available and more of direction on where those hunters can hunt. So we feel that yes, it is a bigger number, but there's more area, and because we're directing some of those hunters to different places, we think that the pressure will be fine for the number of sheep that are in there. It's a good question, though.
Thank you.
All right, Gene.
Yes.
Any questions on the rest of the recommendations?
No questions.
Riley?
I think most of my questions are answered. I think Kobe answered some of those with the non-resident. I know we had a lot of comments that came in. I think we all saw those on the number of non-resident tags, the number of tags coming out, and how we were as the RAC and the board and the division looking at those and trying to make it work for everybody. So I think those questions have been answered, but I hope everybody saw those and read through them, and I appreciate everybody who took the time to send those in, and everybody that's watching on YouTube. Thank you. If you were one of those that sent it in, we did go through those and read them, and they weigh on our minds.
Thanks, Riley. Chad?
No questions.
Nick?
No question.
Thank you. Sean?
No questions.
Verlin?
No, I got a question. I don't make a comment, but on the example that Colby gave earlier about he bring up buffalo, bison, how they put the numbers down because of what they're seeing. So why do you adjust hunt numbers based on calf crop when you don't count those till they're yearlings?
Is Wade on this call? I think he is too. Or I know Brad's here, but I thought Wade was maybe going to listen in tonight for Southern Region questions.
Yeah, I'm here.
I could take Berlin's question. Is that?
You bet. Yeah. So, in the management plan, Verlin, that you've sat on in the past, the age objective, or the objective, the population objective is based upon adults post-season, and so we know those calves that were born last year or this past year will be available as adults in this upcoming season. An adult is considered a buffalo that's 1 year age and older. And so those calves that we're basing the recommendation on will be 1.5 years old during this next hunt, the upcoming 2020 hunt.
But Verlin, I think some of this might just come at just a discrepancy in how we manage wildlife and maybe how the agricultural community manages AUMs. And we're not trying to be sneaky. We're not trying to do anything that is, we're trying to be upfront with this recommendation, and Wade can verify this for me, but we're going to come in under the population objective that we're managing for with this current recommendation. And I know that there's a pinch down there on the Henrys. I know this drought hit everybody really hard. We tried to be really cognizant of that. We really hit those bison hard for a couple years, and we're pulling back a little bit to allow that to recover, especially with the poor cow-calf ratios.
All right, you can move on, man. No other questions.
Thanks, Vernon. Craig, any questions?
I don't have any questions, no.
Tammy?
No questions here.
And Dan? Okay, I do have one additional question, Kobe, on those buffalo, and maybe you can defer it. But on the buffalo archery, this is a comment we all got. There's 2 archery tags. One of those is going to a non-resident. Is there any reason that we did 2 instead of 3 so that we could have 1 to those with the most points and 1 random? By just having 1, it goes to a random permit.
Yeah, we heard that was brought up in the Central Region RAC as well. And Wade, again, you're on the line, but it wouldn't be detrimental to increase that to 3 permits to give a bonus point to the resident there. If that's the direction the RAC decides to go, that's not something we'd fall on our sword on. We probably will reevaluate the timing of that hunt if we keep an archery hunt out there and the timing of that hunt, because it's not doing what we wanted it to do. It's still moving those bison earlier. And so you may see either the timing change or that hunt go away or something. But for this year where the hunt's there, it's on the books, it's not going to hurt. Is that correct, Wade?
Yeah, absolutely. Adding another permit to make up for that non-resident to go to a public hunter would be just fine.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the comments section. On the comments section, we're going to do the same format of a roll call, but I think what we may want to do on this comment section is if we get into a subject and your comment aligns with someone else, let's speak up and try to lump the comments together so we're talking about them at one time. Let's start with let's kind of do the same thing on the deer. So we'll start with the deer, the elk, and then we'll approach the balance. So Austin, do you have any comments on the deer?
My one comment on the deer would just be on, now that we're allowing late muzzleloader seasons on all general units, we need to keep in mind what that does to limited entry units that exist inside that general unit. And the example is the Cash Crawford hunt, where guys have applied for that hunt, and now there's going to be muzzleloader hunters in there right before them hunting that general season unit. So definitely some concern there from sportsmen that are seeing these late muzzleloader hunts and how they're impacting. And I think next year we're definitely going to have to look at these late muzzleloader hunts and how many permits are being issued and how they're affecting that unit as a whole, other hunts on the same unit in that. So that's my comment to the RAC about limited entry deer.
All right, Bart, any comments on the deer?
Mine was along the same lines. We're decreasing permits in some areas, but then we're increasing late muzzleloader. I wasn't quite sure why.
I think we heard that quite a bit as the muzzleloader was a bit of a concern. So we can look at that in our recommendations if we want to. Gene, comments on the deer recommendations?
Yes. As far as late muzzleloader, every time we get a new idea for a new hunt, it starts out with 3 or 5 units, then it goes to 8 or 9, and then it goes to everywhere. And we're getting a lot of hunts out there on all these units. Austin asked about other permits on the sheep in particular. I've been asking about this on all the big game for quite a while, that we need to know how many doggone permits are going out. Like the pay to slay people never get cut, but it's the same people that are going to get cut on this reduction of deer tags that always take the cuts. And at least it ought to be laid out so that everybody can see it. Now on the cuts that they've recommended, the southern regions got taken the brunt of it, 16% of the tags on the southern unit, and on a couple of the individual units, it's a pretty high percentage. Now, I'm in agreement with the cuts because I think they've got to be made. As far as the permits go and the hunter satisfaction and how many hunters we're going to lose on these big cuts, it's a toss-up between losing them because we cut hunting opportunity or losing them because they go out and can't find any deer. It'll probably come out to be about the same. But I'm betting that landowner permits aren't being cut, and that any pay to slay, we've got a bunch of pay to slay in the dedicated hunter program. They can buy points, that's pay to slay. And so they won't be cut. But the same group gets cut whenever there's a cut. So that's my comment on that. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Gene. Riley.
Yeah, I support the recommendations. I support the light muzzleloader hunts. I think that we're doing some good things. This is a renewable resource. That's what we're talking about here, and it's our obligation as RAC members and as the division to try to manage that resource. And I think we're doing a good job of it. I think some of these recommendations that we've made in the past are good things, and I think that they're middle ground for a lot of the sportsmen and our partners in agriculture and Forest Service and BLM. I think we're all coming together to do some of these things really well. And there's not a perfect science to this, and so you've got a lot of smart people doing a lot of really hard work behind the scenes, and that's where these numbers are coming from. And I think with the numbers that we saw last year with our total herds, these cuts had to happen. And as we saw from most of the comments, a lot of them were wondering if we were being aggressive enough. And so I think it's a good start, good middle ground, and we have to kind of see what the summer holds. Hopefully the feed holds out this spring, and we're all out of quarantine and out being able to pound the hills, and that the fawn crop and everything rebounds. So I'm in support of the division. I appreciate all the hard work and the recommendation.
Thank you, Riley. Chad, any comments?
No comments.
Nick?
Well, I'd like to support, what Riley just had to say, about the division. As I read through all the recommendations and the work, there's a lot more science than guesswork in this by far. And it works, I think, to the favor of those that want to cut tags and those that want to increase them or have them remain the same. So thank you for all your work. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Sean?
Yeah, we like to support the division's recommendations. Also, kind of want to commend them on putting out those collars. It's really nice to have that solid survival data. We're making some of these hard decisions. But yeah, we support the recommendations.
Thanks, Sean. Verland?
Yeah, I'd support the recommendations and maybe think that there should be a few little more cuts because the deer population is hurting here. And the area that I live in. And so I'll support them, but I support a bigger cut if I had to.
Thanks, Vernon. Craig?
Yeah, the people I've talked to, well, first of all, I support the cuts on the Antlerless on Pine Valley. We don't want to get where some of these other units have dropped off so bad. I guess the other comment that I've got from people talking that pay a lot of attention to the herd here is they're concerned about the buck tags. I mean, Pine Valley's become kind of a premium area for a general season hunt tag area, and they'd like to see it kind of stay that way, and so they're concerned about the number of buck tags, and particularly that late muzzleloader hunt killing some big bucks. So that's my comments.
Thanks, Craig. Tammy?
I'm kind of following suit as these guys do. I like the recommendations. I think we could have done a few more cuts on the beaver, possibly Southwest, because we got our boots on the ground. We're seeing that low number, not only on the herd size, but the harvest itself. So, but in general, I approve of all the cuts. I do get a lot of comments. There's still a lot of people that are not sold on those late season hunts. They're not too happy about that, and I wasn't too sure about putting them on every single unit. I mean, I only hunt 2 units, so not too sure about the rest of them, but that's my comment.
Thanks, Tammy. Dan?
We support the recommendations too, and appreciate the division's efforts with the telemetry work. I think it'd be really nice to have a little bit of telemetry on deer out in the Southwest Desert unit, specifically Pine Valley and Hamden Valley. So hopefully that'll be considered in the future.
Thanks, Dan. Any additional comments that we want to have on the deer portion? Then we'll move on to the elk. Speak up quickly.
Hey, Braden, this is Austin. I would like to bring up SFW's position or recommendation for the cash general deer to cut an additional 800 permits. I know that was passed in the northern region RAC, or the central discussed that as well. So they wanted to cut an additional 800, so they would have a total cut of 1,600 permits from cash general deer, and I think that's more than warranted for what they're asking for up there.
And Covey, it sounds like the division supports that.
Sorry, I'm trying to get you off mute. Yeah, yes, we would support an additional cut of 800 permits. And after we ran those numbers, we're working hard to manage what we've agreed to manage to in the deer plan. We're trying to be as more proactive than we've ever been.
Thank you. Any additional comments? We'll move on to elk.
More of a question, Braden.
Go ahead.
I agree with the cuts that we're going to make. What impact does that have on the budget for the department, for the division?
It's scary when you start asking a biologist about budgets, man. We can't even balance our checkbooks. Obviously, wildlife is funded by hunters and fishermen, but that's not our primary concern. That's the truth is our primary concern is to manage these populations how we've agreed to manage and have healthy, robust populations, ensuring success into the future. So yeah, we know we're going to take a hit on this, but that's not the primary concern. The primary concern is what have we agreed to manage to. Kevin, you're probably as versed to answer this as anybody. Anything you'd add to that?
I'm back. Yeah, Kobe, I would have answered that exactly the same way you did. It will, and Nick, to answer your question, it will have an impact on our budget. It's, as an agency, we're about 90% self-funded, which is different than almost any other state agency, which comes with some real advantages. but it also, you know, comes with these kind of issues that when our populations are low and we cut tags, that it impacts our budget. But it's what we've agreed to do. Luckily, the division is managed fiscally very well. We have a bank account that we can draw on in times when we need to do this. And so I think, although it will affect our budgets, it's still the right thing to do.
And just to add one more thing to that too, Kevin, when we were making these cuts, nobody even brought up the fact, the budget. Everybody talked about what's the right thing to do. What have we agreed to do? And those were the discussions. Then we've got some folks hired that worry about money. We'll let them worry about money. That's their job.
Thank you, Kobe. Appreciate that, Kevin. Any additional comments there before we move on to elk? All right, let's hear comments from the RAC on the elk. We'll go in the same order. Austin, comments on elk. Next agenda item, Austin, you're at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I jump quick enough and change gears here. I do not have any comments on elk at this time.
Bart?
Neither do I.
Gene?
No comment.
Riley?
No.
Chad?
No.
Nick? I think you mouthed no if I'm a lip reader. So that's Sean.
No comments.
Verland.
No comments.
Tammy. Craig.
No comment.
And Dan.
No comment.
Boy, that was easy on elk. We need to bring up like spike hunts again or something to get some conversation going. Let's jump into the remainder of the once in a lifetime recommendations. Austin, any comments on the remainder?
I do have some comments. I think they're mainly going to revolve around desert sheep. I mean, as we manage the species, a sheep tag is a very special thing, and those that get the permits usually expect a special experience, if you will. And I think it's in the best interest of, as sportsmen and as the state of Utah, to manage perhaps a couple of units for, I would say, higher quality or higher trophy potential. I know this has been requested by quite a few different groups of sportsmen and by hunters themselves, that, you know, if you want to have that experience and have a higher chance at a older class sheep, then, you know, these units may be for you. If you want an opportunity hunt or where we can offer more permits, these other units may be better for you. And I understand that's why we have that gap in the sheep plan of, say, 30 to 60% of the estimated class 3 and class 4 rams available. So it's been brought up that perhaps the Zion unit and the Kaparowitz West units for sheep have the highest trophy potential, and let's try to manage those as such by recommending lower permit numbers closer to the 30%, still within the guideline, and leave the other units to manage for that 40 to 60%, you know, the estimated rams. So I'd like to see how that's received by the RAC, or if there's discussion further about, do we manage all units the same, or can we set aside some units, much like we do with elk with a higher age class in certain units? Can we do the same with sheep to keep auction tag prices high, to keep revenue coming in from applicants wanting to apply, and keep Utah at the forefront of sheep conservation?
Thanks, Austin. Bart.
I have no comments, although it was interesting what Austin said. So.
Thank you. Gene?
I'm not too concerned about that the trophy hunters have to have a bigger trophy. I look at, I go into Cal Ranch or IFA, and I see all these heads hanging on the wall because they shot a trophy that was too big to hang in their danged house. So I'm not really into that. However, I don't think I'd oppose it today if the RAC decides to go that way.
Thanks, Gene. Riley.
I have been waiting for a Gene comment for several months now. I appreciated that, Gene. It made me smile. I needed that in my quarantined room down here. So I don't have really any comments necessarily, although I would respond to Austin and just say that I wouldn't be opposed to that either. There is a slight concern, especially in the area where I live, where I'm within the area of the West. And some of those same things that Austin talked about have been brought up by sportsmen. And I think that it would be beneficial as long as it was kept still within the management plan on that lower end of the spectrum. We could still accomplish some of the things that we want to as sportsmen and still be within the mandate set forth by the division.
Thanks, Riley. Chad?
No comments.
Nick?
No comment.
Sean?
Yeah, we support the division's recommendations and really appreciate the aggressive permit numbers on the Oak Creek Bighorn. Because the proximity of that domestic sheep allotment to the north, we're kind of concerned about disease issues and keeping those, I guess, not stockpiling a lot of big rams. I think will help reduce contact on that. But yeah, support the recommendations.
Thanks, Sean. Verlin?
Yeah, I've got a comment. It sounds like we've already got some units that are producing big sheep. If they're 8-year-old dying of natural causes, if these guys want a trophy, they should put in for those units. I'm sure they're harder to hunt, but that's all part of the deal. Comment on the pronghorn over here on Parker Mountain. I see that not hunting any, which that's the thing about pronghorn. They're subject to hard winters, so I'm not going to complain about antelope this time, or because a couple of big winters took care of that. They'll be back. The elk is a problem here. I've got cow elk encroaching on my farm that I've never had before. So I think we need to hunt more elk and see what we can do about that. They have no natural. I mean, they did comment on a lion will kill an elk every now and then, but they're pretty hardy in the winter. So there's just I would like to see more hunting of the elk. I'm like Gene, I'm not into trophies. I think waste a lot of resources trying to grow horns. And I guess that's my comment.
Thanks, Verlin. Craig?
I don't have any comments. I'm good.
Tammy?
Yeah, my only comment, I do like, I guess it was Austin that made the comment about Zions. My only concern down there is the crowding. I think we were having some population issues and having them into town. So I worry about, cutting the tags back on that and not being able to control that population. But I think we need to be really aggressive on these other ones. I'm looking forward to the hunts on the Mineral Mountains. We're having a hard time keeping those sheep on the unit and up on the mountain to begin with. So if they're starting to see those issues in Oak City, then I'm all for adding some more tags there and being aggressive with that. Other than that, I support the recommendations.
Thanks, Tammy. Dan?
Support the recommendations and no more comment.
I do have a comment myself on this topic. And actually, after I get done I understand Covey has some information to share on the sheep, but I want to talk about sheep and the buffalo. I would really like to see and support the SFW's recommendation as far as, actually, I guess that wasn't SFW. That more came from another, just a public comment on establishing the Caparowitz West as more of a trophy sheep unit. I think that unit really lends to that. It's very isolated. Yeah, those sheep don't have a whole lot of places to wander. And I think you don't have to worry on that unit. Zion's does have me a little concerned. We had the disease there just a couple of years ago, and it doesn't seem like we're able to maintain that population really well. And along those same lines, I'm very happy and excited to see what the division's doing on the Oak Creeks. Those are a California bighorn. They don't carry the same trophy potential as the other sheep, and we are upping the tags quite a bit. So I like the strategy that we up them where we can, and maybe on Caparowitz West or some of these other units, we could look at turning them into a little bit more of a trophy type hunt, older age class. So that's something I would like to see. And then my other comment would just be that I think we really should look at that archery buffalo hunt of adding one more tag to it, so we have a point tag and a random tag. So those are just my couple of comments when we come to recommendations. Kobe, you had some information to share on the sheep, correct?
Yeah, I just wanted to show the group, and maybe, so the division kind of did this exercise that you're talking about, looking at different to those units, addition to the rest of those units, for sheep right now, where we should manage them. One of the issues we have is that when we get high ram to ewe ratios, there is a lot more potential for those rams to wander. And when they wander, they end up in trouble, causing conflict, and potentially bringing back disease. So we did this exercise when the plan came through. It wasn't set out like it was in the elk plan, but let me show you just, Jace put together this graph today, and I'll explain a little bit, but Jace, be ready to speak as well, please. This isn't every desert bighorn unit in the state, but this is a lot of them. And so the plan should be coming up again right now. The plan allows us to do a couple things in the way that we present bighorn, a pretty wide range. And it says we can offer 30 to 60% of class 3 and 4 rams, right? So mature rams, 3/4 curl to full curl, or 15 to 25% of total rams counted on the unit, right? So the scales aren't exactly the same, but it depends on age class and how you allocate those. And when we did that, we created a slider. On the right-hand side is if we were offering at the very top of the unit, the most permits we could offer. The left-hand side is if we're offering, and the red color is if we're offering at the very most restrictive that we could offer for that unit. So as we see these units, and again, they might not line up with everything that sportsmen or hunters want to see, but we took other things into consideration. And maybe we got some of them wrong, right? Maybe we need to continue to work with groups to say, hey, maybe the West is the better unit to have more trophy on, or maybe but as we look at that, we're pretty conservative in the plan on almost all of our sheep units. You know, not even hitting into the green or the upper end there until we hit the San Rafael. Even on the Henrys, where we're trying to be more liberal, we're still right there in the middle. And the Caparowitz and some of these units, you know, even the Zion, still on the conservative end. So I just wanted to share that with the group. Jace, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I wouldn't add much. I would say that when you look at this red to green scale here, recognize that in the statewide management plan, we expanded the parameters at which we could offer or recommend permits. So just because we're not all the way to the very right doesn't mean we ever really need to be. We just expanded the parameters to give our biologists more flexibility in offering permits if there ever is a situation where they want to be very liberal or very aggressive with permit recommendations. So that's one thing. The way this shakes out here is that essentially 55% of the permits that we are giving or recommending for this next year are going to be on units that we're managing more liberally or hunting more aggressively. And 45% of them will be on units that we are hunting more conservatively. So if you wanted to take that and apply it to trophy potential or the size of the rams, half of the units, half the permits are going to be managed for older rams, half of them are going to be managed for younger rams, is about how that shakes out. So that's all I did.
Thanks, Chase. Thanks, Braden.
Thank you. If there's any additional comments, if there's no additional comments, we'd also entertain a motion at this time. What I'd like to do on the motions, just to reiterate what we've done in the past, is making motions on changes you want to see to the plan, and then the final motion would be to take the remainder of the plan as presented. So any additional comments, or if we want to start entertaining a motion.
Gene here.
Yeah, we could start, maybe we could do this the same way we did our comments, is start with the deer, go to elk, and then go to the remainder. Go ahead, Gene.
Just on general comments over the whole thing, particularly sheep. Sheep country is pretty hard, and you're kind of planning on a sheep hunter being in the prime of life. But with the point system, by the time you draw a sheep tag, and it goes too with elk and other big game, by the time you draw, you have to have a gun rack welded on your walker or your wheelchair. And you can't cover that country, and you're not going to hunt or stay into getting the full curl ram or the 375 elk because you're too doggone old to cover the country. Thanks.
Thanks, Gene. Anyone want to take a stab at a motion on the deer portion? If there's any changes, if there's no changes we want to ask for, then we could wait and just accept the division's recommendations. Are there anything we would like to ask on the deer portion?
Mr. Chair, is there a way that you can sum up some of the comments? Do we have those? So
in this format, we kind of address this going in, but we send out emails to all the RAC members a couple of weeks ago asking them to read their comments. We're asking the RACs to represent the comments they received. And
no, I'm sorry, just point of clarity.
Oh, just from the RAC?
Just the RAC comments. Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Riley. Yeah, we can do that. In fact, I'll give it to Kevin so he can kind of summarize that. Thank you.
All right, I've got the comments down kind of by the people that made them, so that's how I'm going to go through them. Austin had expressed some concern about Southwest Desert deer permits and the late season muzzleloader hunts and the impacts that they may be having on limited entry hunts. He would like to see us address the SFW recommendation on the cache, and then just brought up the idea of managing the Zion and the Comparowitz West units for desert bighorn sheep more conservatively than the others. Gene expressed a general concern about cutting 9,000 permits over statewide, but I think later expressed that he sees the need for that. We had a couple of comments about needing to know total number of permits with conservation permits. That's not something that we can address here in recommendations or in a motion on the recommendation. And then let's see, Braden would like to see us add one resident archery tag to the Bison, or one resident tag to archery Bison, so that there's one that's available for the highest point holders and one that goes into the random draw. He's also supportive of establishing the Comparowitz West as a high trophy unit. but at the same time supports the increase in sheep tags on the Oak Creeks. Riley expressed that he supports the recommendation, but also has some interest in Austin's comments relative to desert bighorn sheep. Nick has expressed support. Sean has expressed support. Verlin has expressed general support, but said he would also support more cuts in deer tags. He's not supportive of cutting desert bighorn sheep tags. Craig expressed concern about not reducing the number of buck tags on the Pine Valley. Tammy has expressed general support, but also indicated that she would support more cuts to the deer tags, buck tags, and Dan has indicated that the BLM supports the recommendations. Those are the notes I've got. Hopefully that captures what everybody said.
Right. We'll entertain a motion again if anyone's ready.
Chairman, this is Austin. I can make a motion about the deer section. I move that we accept the department's recommendations for general season and limited entry buck deer with the amendment to reduce the cash general season buck deer permits by an additional 800.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I would second that.
So Tammy seconded that motion. Do we have any additional comments? Okay, we'll go to a roll call vote then. Again, okay, we're making sure we have the motion correct here, and then we'll go to the roll call vote. Yeah, Kevin, would you mind just stating what the motion was?
Okay, Austin. The motion is to accept the recommendations for deer but reduce the cash general season unit by an additional 800 tags.
Austin's not a yes, so I think we captured it. So let's do the roll call on this one. Austin.
Yes.
Art.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yeah.
Verlin.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
And passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's jump over to elk. We didn't have much of a discussion on elk. I don't know if anyone wants to ask for anything different in the plan or if we want to accept it as presented.
Not seeing anything. I just move on to sheep, maybe.
Okay, let's just move on to sheep. If we can go past elk and just incorporate that into the remaining. Any recommendations dealing with the sheep? Or motion, sorry, I'd entertain a motion with a once in a lifetime and antelope.
I just want to make a comment. So this, on the bison, we talked about archery tags. And it was a comment made that it's not working out like we wanted it to. And our experience has been that it's just pushing the bison down on the winter range sooner. Maybe we ought to just remove those and leave the, put the extra tags in the general season, and that's all it's doing. We didn't want it to do that, and that's what's happened. And anyway, I should have commented during the comment.
You know, I think maybe we could have Kobe comment on this, but my understanding is we've already passed the season dates for the year. And so this would be something that we need to change next year, not something we could do this year. Kobe, do you have any comments to that?
No, that's correct. We've already offered that up as a hunt, but Verland, I think you'll see a change either in season dates or a change in that hunt this November. And let's work with Wade to get that, because you're right. I mean, deer worked well and the bison stayed up high. The next year, when they felt the pressure, even from archery hunters, they dropped down on the winter range. And that's not what we were trying to accomplish. We're trying to get the harvest without pushing them out on the winter range. And so I think you'll see a change in that this fall.
Thank you. Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Good.
Craig, were you speaking up?
I was just going to say I'd make a motion we accept the deer plan as amended, the elk and the once in a lifetime.
So you're making a motion to accept the rest of the plan as presented. Is that your motion?
Yeah.
I would second that. This is Nick.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Nick has seconded that. Any additional comments?
Chairman, this is Austin. I'd like to have a comment on that motion that if we'd like to get that additional Henry Mountains archery permit or any sheep permit changes into that, we would need to make an amendment or change that motion if we want to get those through.
Would you want to make that amendment, or are you asking if anyone else wants to?
I could definitely make that amendment if that's the easiest way to go about it.
Why would we want to add another tag when it's not doing what we wanted to do in the first place? That would be my comment on that.
I don't think adding the tag is hurting or helping the reason for that archery hunt. I think that adding the tag is to those that put in for that archery hunt down there with a lot of points, thought they'd have a chance to draw with their high points. By adding one tag, we're providing that opportunity. Would be my comment, Vernon.
Okay, so you add one tag, you take it out of the general season then.
No, I'm not asking to decrease the other tags. I'm just asking to increase one tag. Berlin, I'm asking to kill another buffalo.
Well, I don't want you chasing them on the winter range earlier.
I just don't see that one tag would have that great of an impact on that. Maybe Kobe could speak to his thoughts on that. Do you think one tag is going to impact that?
I don't. And we could, Wade's on the line too, and Wade loves to talk. So Wade, do you think that adding one permit would have, what kind of impact do you think that would have?
You know, I mean, it potentially could have some impact, but I think the impact would be minimal. I think, you know, where we had 20 permits and now we're down to 3 permits, you know, 20 permits last year. Now, you know, very, very few permits, Vernon. So I think just the one permit, you know, potentially you're going to have a few more 4-wheelers out there moving bison around, but I don't think we're not going to have near the pressure that we had last year. And so that's why I think we're saying that adding just one more permit, it'd be a greater benefit than not having it. And I don't think that one permit will make or break the bison going out on the winter range earlier. And to your point, I do, you know, we've talked about this at length, that those bison are going out on the winter range earlier because of the pressure, and we will be addressing that come our November recommendations for hunts. So.
All right. So when you add another tag, but you don't take it from the general season. You just make a new one, huh?
Yes, that's correct. Yep, it'll be adding an additional tag to the numbers already recommended.
Would it help to put that hunt towards the end of the year instead of early?
Yeah, that's one of the options we'll be looking at, but you know, we'll be able to talk about that when those November recommendations come along for these change in hunt structure.
Just a reminder, Verlin, that the 2020 season dates were set in the board meeting from the November RAC. So the 2020 dates are already set.
Okay, so are we setting numbers now then?
Yes, that's what we're doing. This RAC is to set the numbers.
All right.
Chairman, if I can make a quick comment on that, Verlin, just to remind everyone, I bring this up about every RAC meeting, but this is strictly a housekeeping item is how I see it, because it's our backward system of setting the hunts and allowing people to apply and then setting the permit numbers later. And so we need to add a permit so that allows a bonus permit to be given in the draw. Really, that's the reason this amendment has come up.
And I'm perhaps making too many comments here, but Austin, I'd really echo that. I think last year we saw some real examples of not being able to know what apply, or some of the numbers changed drastically from the times we applied till the hunts were drawn. And this year it's even more so. So I echo your comment and concern there. I've brought that up many times myself. I don't know that we ever had an actual motion to amend, Kevin. I think we discussed it, but have we made an motion to amend? Did Austin, do you make a motion to amend?
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. Can I make an official motion right now?
Yeah.
So I move to amend the motion that's on the table with these exceptions to add a Henry Mountains Archery Hunter's Choice permit to the resident pool for a total of 2 permits for resident. And I also would like to amend the permits available for the Caparowitz West Desert Sheep to not increase those permit numbers for 2020, to keep them the same as 2019. That is my amendment.
So your amendment is to add 1 archery resident buffalo tag and to not increase the Caparowitz West permits, sheep permits.
Yes.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I will
I
second
second
the
it.
motion.
I believe that was Riley. 2 people spoke up, but I believe it was Riley, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a second on that. Any further discussion? Okay, so we're going to take a vote just on the amendment, and then we'll come back and take a vote on the initial motion. So, Austin.
Yes.
Bart.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Verlin.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Tammy. Tammy.
Did you get? I said yes. Sorry.
Okay, we got you this time. Dan.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment passes unanimously. So let's go back to the initial motion. The initial motion was to accept the remainder as presented. Are we ready for a vote on that? Any additional comments?
So actually now we're voting on an amended motion. And the amended motion is to accept the balance as presented, but add 1 archery tag to the Bison, or 1 Bison archery tag on the Henry Mountains, and reduce the Caparowitz West permit numbers back to what they were last year. So it's the whole thing now is 1 motion that we're voting on.
Okay, everyone follow that? All right, so let's take a vote. Austin.
Yes.
Bart.
Yes.
Gene,
Yes.
Riley,
Yes.
Chad,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Verland,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
Craig, Tammy, and Dan.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I think that will be our longest agenda item of the night.
Braden, can I
think
add
it's
one more
time
thing
to
before?
take a quick break. Kobe, if you want to add one more thing, and then I think what we'll do is take maybe a
Just-
10-minute break.
Yeah, just before we move on, I want to add one more thing, and that is that the RACs saw there's two things. One, we're working hard to be predictive, and we're not always going to get it right with deer. You know, we might miss it once in a while, but we're using all the data we have now. And I want everybody to remember that and know that we're working hard to be more proactive. And two, with deer recommendations. Two, that is as we come and make these big cuts, you know, our biggest cut was 46%, almost 50% of the permits on a unit. And a lot of these southern units were between 20 and 30, up to 46% of the permits were cut. Then we're going to come back to the RAC with big increases when times are good, and not leave. You know, you can't stockpile these animals. We have good times and bad times, and ultimately, deer populations are driven by climate. And so there were years where we've missed the boat and left a lot of animals out there. And you're going to see recommendations for big increases when times are good too. And I just want to get that on the record.
Appreciate that, Kobe, and I would hope that we support that when those times come. So thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's meet back at 7:10 and resume. we're showing we have 1 more minute.
Mike, do we tell you when we're ready to go back live and you can count us down on YouTube, or how do we come back on?
We are still live on YouTube, so when you're ready to move forward with the meeting, go ahead. I just have a meeting on break graphic showing.
Okay, I think we're ready to go again then, so we can come off break. We'll get started. Well, I guess we're missing one. I've learned there's a good technique to start meetings. You just start and then the seats get filled up. All right, hopefully Verlin joins us quickly, but it is 7:10, so we're going to go ahead and start back up on to the next agenda item, which is the Antlerless permit recommendations. So we'll start with Kevin for the review of the comments we got.
Okay, so in typical Southern Utah style, the comments on our Antlerless were exactly split. 31.03% support, 31.03% oppose, and then we had about 38% of the people that were neutral.
You know, Kevin, I've really liked, as we've started using these comments in the graphs to show the comments we get back, I think it's good for everyone to be able to see that there are a lot of split feelings and split approaches. So this one is interesting, though, where it's split so evenly. All right, let's go to the questions section from the RAC. And again, we'll do it in a roll call format. On this one, I don't think I'm going to break it into deer, elk, and other. We'll just approach it all in one piece. So I think we'll start at the bottom of the list and go up this time. So we'll start with Dan. Any questions, Dan?
No questions.
Tammy? Did we lose Tammy?
No, I'm here. Sorry, my mic is off. I have no questions.
All right, thanks, Tammy. Craig?
I have no questions.
Verland?
No questions.
Sean?
No
I
question.
can turn my camera off.
Nick?
No questions.
Chad?
No questions.
Riley?
No.
Gene?
No question.
Bart? Is Bart still on? Right. Austin, nobody has any questions, so it's still going to just be you.
Sweet. I guess I'll start. Chairman, I do have a question. And this comes from, I do have experience, probably too much experience with this beaver antlerless elk hunt. And so I would like to ask why the Beaver East has new hunts. Or did we kill too many in Beaver North? I haven't seen 2019 harvest reports. So I'm curious how this Beaver East cow elk hunt came in about, when I understood before we were trying to curb the Beaver East population by targeting the Beaver North unit.
Mike, you want to take that one?
Was the goal is to get to object. Look at the harvest success rate between the Beaver North hunts that we had last year and the ones that were, Beaver East limited hunters to that north end. We were looking at 20% to 26%. Just to get we can have higher.
Just really quick, just a suggestion. Mike, you may need to turn your camera off. It feels like your internet's a little slow. We're only catching about every third word. But I
Can you hear?
More words.
Go ahead and start over, Mike.
Hopefully you guys can hear me better now. Sorry, Kanosh is not the best Wi-Fi. Behind it was the hunts where we limited hunters to the Beaver North unit. We had much lower success rates than those hunts where we had them on the Beaver East. Last year, our success rates on the Beaver North were in the 20% range. The hunts where we had it on the Beaver East, we were around 50 and 70%. And so the thinking is that if we open it up more to the Beaver East boundary, we can harvest more elk and get to objective quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Bart, we skipped you. Did you have any questions on the Antlerless?
I did not.
All right, we'll go into comments. I'm going to lead with a comment on this one because it follows right into Austin's question. And Mike and I have talked about this, so I know where Mike's coming from. But the reason we initially split that beaver hunt is the southern end of the Beaver Mountains is much more accessible. You're not getting the complaints on it like you are on the north end from landowners or private property issues. And that north end held more elk. Now, the reason your success rates, in my opinion, are lower on the northern end is because it's much harder to access the elk. It's big country with not as many roads. And as we all know, when elk get shot at, they move and they get away from the roads. So I have some real concerns with this. I was the one that kind of pushed initially to get that split and quit hunting them on the south end of Beaver. So I have some concerns that now we're going unit wide again. And the majority of people hunting cow elk on the Beaver Mountain will hunt them on that south end where it's easier access. So this is a concern for me. Let's go start at the roll call again with comments. Dan, comments on the Antlerless agenda item.
No comment.
Tammy. I think you're waving no, if I can lip read correctly.
Right. No.
Craig?
Don't have any comments.
Verlin?
No comment.
Sean?
No.
Nick?
No comment.
Chad?
No comment.
Riley? Riley, do you have any comments on the Antlerless portion? Maybe we lost Riley. Gene?
I've got a comment on that we're cutting permits quite drastically on all the species on the Mount Dutton and Plateau Parker Mountain. Do we have a problem there?
Now, Gene, that's just to make sure you're asking a question here, right? So you're looking for a response?
Yeah, I'd like a response on
that. One of those is Kyle. The other one's Levi. Kyle, Levi, do you guys want to take those?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Mountain Dutton, right now, we're significantly under objective. We flew the unit this year. We came in just roughly around 1,100 elk. Our objective range is 1,500 to 2,000. So we're just trying to let the elk bounce back and get within our objective.
You're way short on antelope there too.
What was that, Gene?
I'll jump in on antelope. On the Parker, we've had past 2 years low fawn to doe ratios, and so we're just not getting that recruitment to build up the population. We're a little below objective. We've had the hard winters and then some dry summers, and so we're below, and that's why we've cut permits for the pronghorn Parker does.
All right, thanks. Riley, are you back on?
Yeah, I'm back on. Sorry,
Do you have any comments?
having some technical difficulty. No comments.
Okay, thank you. Bart.
No comments.
And Austin.
I'll make another comment about beaver, beaver north elk. So with my help, my family was responsible for quite a few cow elk kills on the beaver north this last year. So I have quite a bit of experience in that unit, and I'm concerned that maybe something's not working as far as getting us to that objective. We offered 980 antlerless permits last year, and I know harvest success is low, but we still can't get that under objective. So now they've recommending only 450 antlerless permits for this year. And I'm questioning how we're going to get that under objective. My experience is maybe the bull to cow ratio is way out of whack. And because we're only killing 33 bulls and 89 spikes, that we're just not going to be able to get that under objective unless we kill more bulls. And I understand that doesn't work with the elk plan, but it's a unit that's in our area that I have concern with about how we've tried throwing cow elk tags at it, and it's just not working to get under objective. So that's my comment on that unit. And I do have another comment as far as sheep, if we can hear that now. There is a new ewe sheep hunt that's falling under the antlerless. So as I understand this, it would create a new section of hunt, which would create a new application and a whole new bonus point structure. These would not be preference points. These would be bonus points for a Rocky Mountain ewe bighorn sheep hunt with 10 permits is what's being recommended. We did receive comments from SFW and other constituents that asked that we direct the board to change that into a transplant and try to move some sheep off the Newfoundland mountains. But I would like to voice my support for our statewide sheep biologist, Jace Taylor, and the work they've done, where moving sheep is expensive, and sometimes the best thing to do is just offer a hunt and shoot them. So that's my comment about that new hunt.
In the northern RAC the other night, Jace addressed this issue, and I wonder if it would be wise to just have him address it for our RAC also. I thought his comments were at least worth hearing. Jace, could you address that?
Yeah, sure thing. So we have the Newfoundland Mountain unit is reaching the population objective, which is a great thing. It's really exciting to have a bighorn sheep unit that's reaching its population objective. We've done translocations off of that unit in the past and moved ewes. We could do that now. There is one destination that we could take them, that's the Stansbury Mountains. The other option is to hunt the ewes. Some of the pros and cons, like Austin mentioned, moving the ewes to the Stansburys would take some money. It would take quite a bit of time. It's not the easiest place to catch. We have to deal with Department of Defense airspace restrictions, and also long ferries, and then moving the animals, and then quite a bit of time that goes into once they make it to the Stansburys. Another con is that moving sheep always involves a level of risk of pathogen transmission. Every time we've taken sheep to the Stansburys, a few of them leave the mountain and wander into places that have, potential for risk of pathogen transmission. To varying degrees, sometimes it's just a couple, and sometimes it's more than that, and sometimes they times we've had to go remove those animals or catch them again and bring them back to the mountain. It just involves some risk. And so considering those pros and cons, we feel it'd be best at this time to hunt the ewes out on the Newfoundland mountains. The Stansberry's is not desperate in need of bighorns, and we feel like the money that we would save, but probably more important, the time we would save, the risk we would avoid, it's worth going ahead and hunting those ewes.
Thanks, Chase. Any additional comments on the antlerless permit recommendations? And if not, we'd entertain a motion. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Let's summarize the comments that have been made.
Okay, this will go pretty quick. The only comments is there's been some concern expressed of just in general about the cow elk recommendations on the beaver. We've heard support for the ewe hunt on the Newfoundland mountains. Concerned about the level of cuts on the Dutton for elk and the Parker pronghorn in terms of the number of cow and doe hunts out there. And then again, some more concern about eliminating the Beaver North cow hunt, or at least reducing the numbers on that north hunt on the beaver unit. And that's it.
Thanks, Kevin. Again, any additional comments, or we would entertain a motion at this time?
Pretty quiet. I'll make another motion. I did the last one. We'll accept the recommendations of DWR on the Antlerless permit.
All right, so Craig Lobb is, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll second that.
So Craig Lobb has made a motion to accept the recommendation as presented, and Tammy has seconded that. Any further discussion? All right, we'll call for a vote. Austin.
Yes.
Art.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Verlin.
Yes.
Craig.
Yeah.
Tammy.
Yes.
And Dan.
Yes.
So the motion passed unanimously. That went very quickly. That makes up the time on the first one. Thank you. On to the next one, agenda item 7, the CWMU rule amendments. Kevin, do you want to review the public comments with us?
Yeah, let me start by just a general comment that this is the most agreeable I've ever seen this group. So you're going to ruin your recommendation if you keep going as you are. On the CWMU rule, the majority of people from in our area were neutral on the proposal because we don't have a lot of CWMUs in southern Utah. That was about 69%, 24% supported, and 7% were opposed to the proposal.
I think we could really throw everyone off, Kevin, if we came in with like 4 or 5 motions on the CWMU rule amendment. All right, any questions? We'll start again at the, once we get the list pulled up here, Kevin, can you put up the roll call for me? So Dan, any questions?
No questions.
Tammy?
You're just waiting for a snide remark from me. That's what you're doing.
I'm hoping.
No. I don't have any questions.
Thanks. Craig?
No questions.
Verland?
No questions.
Sean?
No questions.
Nick?
No questions.
Chad?
No questions.
Riley?
No.
Gene?
No.
Art?
No.
Austin.
One quick question for Chad, if he's available. Can you tell me how CWMUs, they are required to send in T samples, or they have the option to send in T samples so they can do older age? As far as the surveys go or classifications, do they do those on CWMUs or not?
Yeah, so the biologist, if that's in their area, they will sometimes sample that as part of theirs. But the CWMUs also have an opportunity. A lot of them will hire out people to do classifications for them. So I don't think all of them do, but there is opportunity there, and a lot of them do keep track of what they've got on their land.
So this rule change would be probably a direct result of requests from CWMU operators?
If you're talking about where we're allowing them to manage towards a higher buck doe or age class, no, it was a clarification. That's kind of the way it wouldn't really be a worth a limited entry hunt if we were forcing them to manage for lower buck doe ratios. You'd see similar quality as the general hunt, if that makes sense. So if somebody's going to use their limited entry tag or limited entry points, we'd want them to have that ability to harvest a higher quality animal.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Comments? We'll start with Dan on the comments.
No comments.
Tammy?
The reason we're so agreeable is because we have to look at ourselves on the camera. So we're trying to get this meeting through painlessly, as painlessly as possible. No, I think we're good on this. I'm ready to make a motion whenever anybody's done.
All right, well, I'll let you follow up as soon as we go through the list here. Craig?
No comment.
Verlin?
No comment.
Sean?
No comment.
Nick?
I know this will surprise you, but I don't have any comment.
Chad?
No comment.
Riley?
No comment.
Gene?
No.
Bart?
No.
And Austin?
No comment.
All right, we'll entertain a motion, Tammy.
I'm ready. Okay, we'll make a motion to accept the division's recommendations for the CWMU.
Who was that seconded?
Verlin.
Verlin seconded. So Tammy made a motion to accept as presented, and Verlin seconded the motion. Any additional discussion? I wouldn't think so. We'll go ahead and go to a vote. Austin?
Yes.
Bart?
Yes.
Gene? Gene? You're on, I think you're muted, Gene.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Riley?
Yes.
Chad?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Verlin?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
And Dan?
Yes.
Right, the motion passes unanimously. On to agenda item 8, the CWMU Antlerless permit recommendations. So again, we will start with questions. Let's go back up to the top. Austin, we're going to start with you again.
Can I
actually, sorry, we want to have Kevin present the public comments first.
Okay, this one is very similar. Oh, I'm on the wrong, looking at the wrong one there. Hold on just a minute. I'm almost identical to the last one. The majority of people, 72% neutral. And then we had 17% support and 10% oppose the proposal.
Thanks, Kevin. Someone was saying they wanted to make a comment before we started here. I didn't catch who that was.
Mr. Chairman, that was me. I just have some clarifications, actually some corrections to make if I can real quick.
Yes, please do.
Okay, the numbers that we presented, we believe were correct during my presentation, but we have found since the last RAC that there were some that were off. So hopefully you can see this. Let me know if you can see this.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So since the last RAC meeting, this is a little bit of the changes that we found. The Houston East, somehow it got messed up that last year it was only 10 permits, but our database reverted it back to 50 permits. So it should be back to 2 private, 8 public. Roan Cliffs, we had it as 10, should be 6 public permits. Indian Head, Jump Creek, those are all in the southeast region. They all should have been lower, and it was caught, like I said, after that last permit. So you see on the bottom the numbers that changes it to. So essentially, we just dropped a few more permits on that, and this is what we'd present to the board.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate that. I believe that will help us. Thank you. Questions from the RAC. Let's start at the top again with Austin. Any questions, Austin?
No questions.
Bart.
No questions.
Gene.
No questions.
Riley.
No questions.
Chad.
No questions.
Nick.
No questions.
John.
No question.
Verlin.
No questions.
Craig.
No question.
Tammy.
No questions.
Dan.
No questions.
I feel like we should have just done questions and comments all together. We'll do comments now. Yeah, let's just do a general instead of a roll call on this one. Any comments on agenda 8? Wave your hand at me so we can make sure to catch you before we move on. If there's no comments, we'd entertain a motion.
So did you see they canceled this year?
I don't think that was a motion. I think that was someone's talking in the background. Yeah. It's not that scary to make a motion. We just need someone to speak up here.
I'll make a motion
All right, Chad.
that we
I'll second it.
accept the recommendation as presented.
Now that he's made the motion, you still want to second that, Tammy?
Sure.
All right. So we have a motion by Chad Utley and a second by Tammy to accept the recommendations as presented. Austin. So we're going to take a vote. Austin.
Yes.
Art.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yep.
Verlin.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
And Dan. All right, motion passes unanimously. On to agenda item 9. Maybe we'll have a few more questions on this one. Kevin, do you want to give us some public comments on this?
Yes, on this one, there were 31% of the comments were in support, 10% opposed, and 59% neutral.
And I think what I'll do is, again, just kind of open it up at this point. I instead of doing the roll call. So if there's any questions, please just speak up. Go ahead, Tammy.
Yeah, seems how this is totally confusing to me, and I got 3 different devices here turned on, and I can't get back to the original information on the bison hunts. Can you refresh us a little bit on that, or pull the chart up?
Brad, would you mind just giving us a real quick summary of what we're doing on this hunt?
You bet. I can call up the presentation, but I think we can do it briefly. If you need to look at something, we can call it up. Basically, we're asking the RAC to make some rule amendments that would allow for an over-the-counter bison hunt that would, and specifically on the 9 Mile Range Creek unit this year. This over-the-counter hunt would be something where you'd lose your bonus points if you purchase the permit, but we would be able to purchase that type of permit on subsequent years. So that's kind of the short version of what we're doing. What we're trying to do is address lots of bison migrating off tribal lands on the east side of the Green River onto the 9 Mile Range Creek unit where we don't have a management plan, so our population objective is 0. We're trying to use sportsmen to be a tool to reduce that population and push bison back to reservation lands.
Do you have any additional questions there, Tammy?
No, I just want to make sure I was remembering it right. So I appreciate that. Is this hunt going to be able to be on private property, or I guess that's with permission possibly?
A good question. The 9 Mile Range Creek unit does have a lot of private land. However, where these bison end up are primarily on public lands. The issue really isn't private land access. It's just the terrain is very, very difficult terrain. The bottom of Desolation Canyon, and much of this is roadless. This will be a very, very difficult hunt. And why we did this kind of over-the-counter approach is so that we get the right type of hunter, the few that can really do this, because it's not for the faint of heart. It'll be rather difficult for most folks.
So are these over-the-counter tags, are they something that, because I know it's a migration problem, basically. And so when they migrate over there, is it going to be one of those that, when you guys or the property owners or the range permittees see the buffalo, they can actually, or is it just a timed hunt, a specific time, or is it going to be when they're available, when they're...
Great. Yeah, what we tried to do is make it as flexible as possible. So the season date framework is August 1st through January 31st. Every possible day we can hunt a big game animal in the state. That way, if something did show up on some private land, they go buy a tag and they go shoot a bison. But the vast majority, 99% of the bison, they show up in late October, early November, and stay the winter. So there's really just a narrow window of opportunity in October and November before the snow, keeps you out of that country, where that's where most of the harvest will happen, probably the month of November.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Bart, you had a question?
I did. So how long I don't remember it being said, how long have the bison been going there?
Pardon me. 10 to 15 years. It's been consistent. They've been here every year for the last 10 to 15 years.
Okay, and you said primarily, I was in the video and also in the agenda or the packet, it says, it's basically they're impacting on grazing and, forage. And this is, you just said it's primarily on public lands. Is this state lands or is it BLM land that it's on?
The majority of it's BLM lands, state lands as well, but and there are some private parcels where they occur on.
So it's essentially this, this is the new management plan, correct? What we're doing here?
Not necessarily. Creating a management plan is, acknowledging bison on this unit, and that's something where all the people involved, private landowners, BLM, public land grazers, things like that. There really isn't a stomach for bison right now, so we're just kind of managing to 0 for now. And will we harvest all the bison? Probably not, but it may push them back. Just make it a place where they don't feel welcome.
if they're natural, yeah, so if they're naturally migrating over there, I was wondering, you said, is it the Ute Indians are the ones that consider this their herd? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, they manage.
Well,
Pardon me, sorry.
oh no, I'm just, well, if we take it to zero, how's that going to impact what's on the tribal lands? I mean, because it's not like they're going to see it as a no-go boundary. They're still going to go, right? And
Very good point. Yeah. This is just a small portion of the total bison that are migrating. You know, they live most of the year on tribal lands over there. It's a population that's grown quite a bit lately, and since it's grown so much, they're starting to disperse to other areas. This area isn't the only place they migrate, you know, off tribal lands to the north and south as well. It's, you know, it's a complex relationship with the tribe. You know, they have management authority over those bison most of the year, and so
when they're on their
yeah.
when they're on tribal lands. I mean, if this place is difficult to get to, is there a better place to have a? I mean, is there like? I'm not as familiar with that area, and it's obviously not in here. But is there a better place to have the hunt? Is there a place along that corridor? Is it straight from tribal lands into this desolation where it's more easier to meet your objectives?
That'd be great if there were somewhere by a road somewhere or something. No,
yeah, I know it's kind of silly, but
they go straight. You know, they just swim the river in the bottom of Desolation Canyon.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So.
And Bart, I want to make it clear too that our goal is not to decimate this population or have negative implications for the tribe. Our goal is to apply enough pressure, stay on the unit where they're managing for bison, which would be in this case tribal lands. They are managing for bison. We are not at this point, and so
right.
Bison really respond to pressure.
Right, and there's no stomach among landowners, private or public, to have bison in these areas.
At this point.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Good questions. Any additional questions?
Mr. Chairman, Austin here. I have a question. Anytime we create a hunt where there's significant consequences for waiting periods, because if you purchase this permit, I understand your bonus points are void and you can no longer apply for bison ever again in your lifetime simply for purchasing the permit. So my question is, if you purchase this permit, say at a DWR office, is there a waiting period? Like, can I go out there on the Range Creek and man, they're swimming across the river, so my buddy's driving into Price to buy a permit and bring it back to me? Like, is there a 72-hour waiting period or anything discussed along those lines?
I don't know that I know the answer to that. Do you, Kobe?
There isn't a waiting period associated with the purchase of this permit. There is with other, and that's probably where you bring it up, Austin, is because with like Cougar permits and other things, there's the waiting period. With this permit, there's nothing in a rule that any period of time before you could hunt.
Okay, a follow-up question: Are we able to turn that tag back in or that permit back in, surrender it 30 days before the season start, and have that waiting period reversed? I know it starts August 1st, so it'd have to be July 1st, but if someone gets excited, buys it, can they turn that back?
If it followed the rule, the current rule, yes, they could. The problem is that I don't know you could even buy it you'd probably buy it within the 30-day period when the hunt opened, if that makes sense. And part of this will be an educational video they'll have to watch to know all the consequences of buying this permit. And there's two sides to this too. One, as long as we have this permit, you can buy it every year. Even after your waiting period's revoked, you can buy the permit every year. The other part is that this is exactly the same way that we handle moose on CWMUs, conservation, expo permits. Such a demand on the system. And I'm sure you're well aware of that, Austin. There's such a demand on the system that ways only if you harvest or only that or only this. But the truth is you're getting an opportunity to hunt bison and you're not being forced, and it's your choice. Folks with points in other species that know they'll never probably ever get a hunt bison that'll take advantage of this, or even if you had a few bison points, you might take advantage of it then. So.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. One other question, are we aware of any licensed guide services that can go down the Green River? Do you know if the BLM issues permits to any guide services that'll potentially exploit this hunt or take advantage of that?
Hunting guides per se, not necessarily, but there's plenty of river runners, out of Moab, and that they would, that'd be the big issue, is being able to run the river to get to some of these bison. There are guides in the area that it could be helpful, because horses or a raft will be pretty necessary in these hunts. So,
thank you.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, I'd like to. So these bison are all tribal bison, or is there anything from the Book Cliffs that spill over that way?
I don't know for certain. The vast majority of them are tribal bison. It's possible, but that some of the Henry Mountain bison have mixed in with some of those tribal bison and moved in. But the collar data that we have, we've captured and collared some of them. They've all been staying on tribal lands and everything. None of the ones that we originally released over on the Book Cliffs, on the public lands on the Book Cliffs, have come this way and come to the range. Tribal bison. Most of them have ear tags where they've been rounded up by the tribes.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to comment that I think this is a good thing for you to try to eliminate that herd. I know the ranchers in the area are having a lot of impact from it. I doubt if you'd be able to do much with them with that kind of terrain and everything, especially the way bison are. They're just pretty hard to manage. I don't know whether you guys realize that, but that's the problem with bison. You need to be careful where you put them, because sooner or later they'll cause some problems. Thanks.
Thanks, Verlin. Any additional questions? And we'd also open up for comments at this time.
Gene here, I've got a question. You're wanting to change your rule. Is there any likelihood that this rule will apply somewhere else, or that it'll be a rule that we're not going to really be happy with in a few years?
It could apply somewhere else, unforeseen place where bison show up on a unit where there isn't a management plan and causing impact. So, this, we could ask the RAC and the Wildlife Board to implement it on some other unit. Unforeseen impacts, unfortunately, they're unforeseen, so I don't know. But yeah, it's new terrain.
And Gene, that's exactly why we did this. It's kind of a two-step process. One, the rule change allows us to call a management bison hunt. And two, we're asking you to approve a management bison hunt in the Range Creek area. So we could end up with bison coming off the Book Cliffs or the Henrys and going to places where we don't have a management plan. And at that point, we may ask the board and the RAC to approve another hunt to push those animals back. So the answer is, it's a tool that we could use in the future, and maybe a good thing if we get in a situation where we're in a little bit of trouble.
Doesn't the new rules just say that the management bison units may be established by the Wildlife Board in areas where management objectives are for zero bison? So you can basically do it anywhere once it's approved.
That's correct. We'd have to come back to the board and through the RAC process and ask them to establish that hunt. But that's correct. We can
zero bison. Okay.
If we have a zero bison objective, yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Kobe, this is Kevin. The only thing I'd add to that, it can apply to any place you have an objective of zero, but the other ingredient there is you got to have bison coming into that area. And right now, this is the only place that applies.
Yeah. Correct, Kevin. And that's why we're only asking for this here at this point.
So I'd like to make a comment. I think that this is a great opportunity and allows that flexibility for these kind of issues. And yet, like you said, it's going to be a special kind of hunter that gets in there and gets the job done, hopefully, and creates that pressure and move them out of there. Those guys are having a lot of trouble, and I think they'll appreciate the help.
Thanks, Tammy. That'd be my comment also. I'm excited that the division is looking at, thinking outside of the box and looking at different approaches. I'm excited that this opportunity is coming up, and hopeful that some guys make their dreams come true. Guys and gals, Tammy.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment here? This is Austin. I agree it's a good thing. I mean, we know bison they're one of the smartest animals to respond to pressure, and hopefully we can curb them to do what we want them to do and to not cross that river. But I still have concern about, we need to try to keep people honest with the process of getting the permit. And so I don't know if it's a waiting period we should consider, but with a steep tag fee of $513, even for a resident, I just have concerns about maybe enforcement issues that could come up there if someone's trying to work the system. Let's keep them honest if we can.
If there's any additional comments, but I'd also entertain a motion at this time.
Yeah, I've got a comment. The only way you're going to move those bison is in a backpack or however you pack them off dead. They're going to be back. We've learned on the Henrys, you can't haze them, you can't fence them, you can't. They're going to go where they want to go. You can put a lot of, in this area, you won't be able to put a lot of pressure on them. The only ones that will move off there permanently will be the ones that they haul off. I like this thing we're talking about with this hunt. I think it needs to be maybe increased to like the have on the Henrys where there's 0. And elk, there's, they say 30 head elk there, but it's been 30 for years, and I don't think they've harvested very many. But an over-the-counter tag for that for someone who wants to hunt the rough country. I mean, I think we ought to make it for more than just bison, maybe elk, maybe other wildlife that have where there's a 0 allotment.
Vernon, and Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think on the Henrys, you can buy a elk tag over the counter and go hunt them.
If you have a buck or bull tag, it's an antlerless control unit. So what we're trying to do there is not add amounts of pressure, and push bison and other animals around and throw a ton of hunters on the mountain. But if you have a buck or bull tag or once in a lifetime permit, you can buy a cow tag and harvest that animal too. And primarily those are the folks that do harvest down there on the Henrys.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments? And again,
Would you entertain a motion?
I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we approve the recommendations of the division to allow this hunt, get it set up.
Okay, so Tammy's made a motion to accept as presented.
Second. This is
and Verlin seconded the motion. Any additional discussion? All right, let's take a vote. Austin.
Yes.
Bart.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Yes.
Riley. Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yeah.
Verland.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
And Dan.
Yes.
All right. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 10. Kevin, do you want to share the public comments with us?
Yes, this is managing predatory wildlife species. Again, the majority of the people were neutral, which actually kind of surprised me. 28% opposed and 15% supported this proposal.
Those are really strange public comments to me. I'm very surprised on this one.
I am too, because I read the comments, and the written comments were mostly in support of this concept.
In fact, strongly supportive, I would say. So
yeah, I don't know.
Kind of an interesting one. All right, we'll open it up for questions from the RAC.
In looking at the presentation, I was surprised the number of deer that Cougar kill, and what my question is that you're talking about like a mature Cougar killing 50 deer a year or something like that?
It's a complicated answer, but generally across the West, if you average it all out between males and females with kittens and all the rest, they generally kill a deer a week. And so they kill other things too, but that seems to be a pretty rough estimate, and that seems to hold true with some of the studies we've looked at here in Utah as well. So they do eat a lot of deer, and when that becomes significant is when deer populations are way below what the habitat can support. Generally, you can start to see some impacts, or they'll either slow a population's growth, or in some cases they may inhibit the deer population from recovering over a significant amount of time. So yeah, it's definitely what we're looking at.
Darren, again, you made some great comments in the northern RAC, and I wondered if you would just maybe summarize those again. You discussed in that one that this addendum item is just simply to align with legislation that's already passed. You're not asking for anything additional, or you're just aligning with legislation that has passed, correct?
That's right. This and the next agenda item are both due to legislation that passed this session. And so in addition to that, as Kobe pointed out earlier, we've got a lot of really good data on our big game populations, especially our deer populations. And so we feel like it's really important that we use that data for this. So it's both things. Yeah. The legislature asks us to do 4 things, or requires to do 4 things in statute. One is we need to determine whether predators are having a detrimental effect on a population. Secondly, we need to remove predators if that's the case. The third thing, which we're not addressing directly with this, but something you'll see as we move forward with recommendations, is the legislature wants us to provide an opportunity for big game hunters to take predators in the fall. And then the final thing is just that we need to report back to the legislature each year on how we're doing on the legislation. So that's what came out of it, and that's really what's driving this.
Thanks, Darren. Additional questions, Bart? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question. So it says, in the recommendations, if the determination is made that predators are the cause of the population decline, or how do you tease out predators or just, too many hunting permits?
There's a couple things that we'll be looking at. Valor did a paper, I believe it was in 2001. They actually did a review of literature in the West. there are certain conditions under which predators can have a detrimental effect on a mule deer herd. And one thing we'd be looking at is where is the herd in relation to the carrying capacity of the range. The closer that herd is to what the landscapes can support, the less effect predators have, because there'll be some other cause of mortality or they'll overshoot the capacity of the range and actually damage the range, and you'll get a pretty hard drop off. So that's one instance, and that's one thing we'd be looking at. That doesn't always necessarily relate to the management objectives. Sometimes those are closely aligned, and sometimes they may not be. And so we'll need to look at that. The other part of this is that if you are going to do predator management, you've got to be aggressive. And so you really need to work hard to reduce the densities. We're not talking about eliminating all the predators on the landscape, but if you don't eliminate enough, you won't see the results you're looking for. And
yeah, I remember I saw one where it was 70% reduction, and when you have those areas where you have, say, a very small population, and it would seem that, are we going to couple increased predator permits with decreased hunting permits as well? It seems to be doing both, but if we're just saying we want to increase opportunity, even in these lower population areas, we want to increase, maintain opportunity for hunting, but so we're just going to increase predator tags. It seems we should do both, increase predator tags, and you're going to have to also bite the bullet and decrease opportunity like we're doing in some of these areas now.
Right. I think in terms of the predator management plan, so where we're actually trying to reduce the densities, there'd be two instances where we'd see that. One would be when we've had a significant drop in the prey species without a correlative drop in predator numbers. And that is what we've seen recently, that we see these environmentally caused die-offs through drought and hard winters, but predators, especially lions, don't react immediately to that reduced prey base. In fact, in some studies, it shows that they can maintain their numbers and still take the same number of deer, 8 years out. And so that's an instance where we'd want to get in and manage that population down. The other scenario that we mentioned in the policy is where, as Covey pointed out earlier, we anticipate a large die-off and just trying to be proactive and get ahead of that. So a little bit of it's predictive. We can see the body condition of the animals going into winter, and we anticipate some significant losses. We'd want to get permits out there that same winter rather than waiting a whole calendar year. So really, those are the two instances for this policy that we'd be looking at. But again, the policy relies on us making a determination that the predators are the issue, and that'd be largely the responsibility of a district biologist who knows what's going on in his unit and can make a justification as to why predators are the issue.
Art, I think we need to do a better job at answering your question too, and that is that really it depends. And I think the sentiment is that predators shouldn't take the brunt of all this, right? We should look at reducing mule deer permits too, where we can, and we definitely agree with that. The problem is if it's a population issue, it will not help increase that population.
Right, and I understand that completely. Yes.
To make sure that wasn't the concern.
Right. Yeah, and I understand there's going to be a lag in predator population response to diminished prey. I get it completely, and we're going to have to take some active management measures. Completely understand it. I just wanted to make sure that we're considering both options.
That's a very fair point, Art. Like if we're reducing or increasing predator tags, it would make sense at the same time, almost always, to be reducing antlerless permits in the area.
Thank you, Bart. Any additional questions?
Thanks.
Gene here. Yeah, I've got a question.
Go ahead, Gene.
Was this legislation absolutely necessary? Didn't the director of the DWR have this authority in the first place?
Largely, yes. And in fact, he exercised that authority this winter when he reopened some units that had closed and increased some quotas. The legislation gives the division some direction. Obviously, after last year's deer hunt, there was quite a bit of public sentiments that we make sure that we're doing this, and so the legislation does put these requirements in statute, which is a little bit of a level above our rules. But this policy has been in place, and mainly what we did in the policy is just add this new data that we've got and use that to help us make decisions.
Is this question or comment time?
We're still on questions. We'll get to comments soon, I'm sure.
Okay.
Any additional questions? All right, Tammy, we're ready for your comment. We'll open it up to
You
comments.
just wanted to tell me to shut up for a minute.
I just wanted to act like I was in control.
There you go. I just wanted to say during the legislative session, there was a huge push to have that language in there. And I think the intent, talking to Representative Albrecht, and that was that this gave the division more support in statute to do what needed to be done. They were getting a lot of grief from some of the other groups that would love to see more predators and a lot less hunters and cattlemen and livestock on the mountains. So I really would like to commend the legislature for getting this passed. It was pretty controversial, but I think in the end it's going to help the division do what they need to do and take care of these predators.
Thank you. Other comments?
Gene here. I need to go back to a question. With all this fervor about predator control, it's up to everything and everybody. Is it still against the law to kill kittens and cubs and nursing cats and nursing sows?
Yes. Yeah, we didn't change those rules.
Any additional comments? And if not, I'd entertain a motion. I want to see someone new make a motion.
That's what I was going to say. Come on, guys.
I'll make the motion to approve as presented.
So Riley has made a motion to accept as presented. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Who was that seconded?
I'll second.
Sean Kelly seconded the motion. Any further discussion? All right, let's take a vote. Austin?
Yes.
Bart?
Yes.
Gene? Was that a yes, Gene? We're losing your connection there, Gene, but I believe it was a yes. Chad?
Yes.
Riley?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Verlin?
Yes.
Craig,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
and Dan.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes unanimous. On to the final action item on the agenda, number 11, the Cougar and Bear Rule Amendment. I think we kind of rolled both of these discussions into one, but this is a separate agenda item. So, Kevin, do you want to give us a public comments on this one?
Yes, this one looks more like the comments that we read would lead you to believe in terms of support. This was 55% of the people that commented supported the presentation of the proposal, 10% opposed, and 35%, 34% were neutral.
Thanks, Kevin. And again, this is a separate agenda item, so let's open it up to questions specific to this, even though we may have covered some of the questions we had already. Any questions from the RAC?
Remind me again of the difference between 10 and 11. I'm fading.
Darren, would you mind?
And this may help with the discussion too. This one, even more than the last one, is just it changes our rule to directly reflect the legislative changes in House Bill 223, and so that statute trumps our rule. This is just to an amendment to the rule to reflect that statute. So really, hopefully that makes it easy for everybody. But we didn't make the changes.
Thank you. And I apologize. I probably confused that last agenda item with my comments a little bit, but they're still very related. So. Any additional questions? Any comments? I'd entertain a motion if we don't have any additional questions or comments.
This is Chad. I motion to accept the item as presented.
So Chad's made a motion to accept as presented. Do we have a second?
Bart, I'll second.
Bart will second. Boy, this is good. We got some new people jumping in. Thanks, Bart. Any additional discussion? Let's take a vote. Austin.
Yes.
Bart.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Verlin.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
And Dan.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This went really well. You never know what technology will do in these meetings, but we went very few problems. So appreciate everyone's effort. Appreciate you taking the time to do this, and thanks for the public that was there watching. We look forward to the day when we can have more interaction and enjoy the public comments a little bit more. Hopefully that will be soon. So thank you, everyone. And with that,
Thanks,
we'll
Braden.
adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Braden.
Thanks, Braden. Thanks, everybody. I think you all adapted well. Appreciate it.